Welcome, everybody, to our April 21st regular City Commission meeting. We'll call the meeting to order. And Nikki, would you please lead us in the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, ma'am. As we begin our meeting tonight, may we all take a moment to quietly reflect together, each according to our own individual beliefs and intentions. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Nikki. All right, we have some awesome people here today that we're going to hear from. We want to call Natalie Gass up to make presentations for our Dunedin Environmental Heroes Awards. Come on up.
Thank you. Mayor, commissioners, and everybody here tonight. We've got a party in the house, all right? My name is Natalie Gass, and I serve as the Sustainability Program Coordinator for the City of Dunedin. And I'm excited. We're here. It's Earth Month. Tomorrow is officially Earth Day. And we have a lot of environmental heroes here with us that we're going to celebrate. I am speaking on behalf of the Committee on Environmental Quality and Sustainability, and we'll be recognizing and celebrating these wonderful people, projects, and organizations. Before I begin, I'd like to turn it over to the chair of that committee, Nicole Matthews, for a few brief words.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. And for everyone that's here tonight, thank you for coming out. The Committee for Environmental Quality is actually a Dunedin-based committee, and everyone that's on that committee is a resident and very active in the city of Dunedin. And every year we like to honor and thank those of us that have been very active in the community and given back in some sort of way to support an environmental cause or a sustainability project within the city. And this year we do have 5 categories that we're going to be giving out these awards for. A nonprofit, a student involvement, elected official, a community project, and grassroots ambassadors. And overall, we would just like to thank the commission as well for the letting us be part of the environmental involvement with the city and sustainability measures. And it's been a pleasure working with Natalie as well, our sustainability coordinator. So I'll let her take it away.
Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you, Nicole. Now the moment we've been waiting for. So I will call up each category, who the winner is, provide a brief statement, and award you with a lovely herb or vegetable plant that you can take home and enjoy.
What kind of herb?
Alrighty.
I was hoping for the herb.
Alrighty. To begin, in the category of nonprofit organization, this year's winner is Blue Green Connections.
Yeah.
Blue Green Connections is an outstanding local organization who led the effort in designating the Gulf Coast as an official hope spot through Mission Blue. They are focused on ocean conservation, community engagement and education, and awareness for sustainable action. All of their work and passion is to be commended, and we want to thank the entire board of Blue Green Connections and their representatives here this evening. In the category of elected official, this year's winner is Commissioner Jeff Gow. Commissioner Gao is a leader in supporting sustainable policies, ideas, and programs. He serves Dunedin's residents, voicing their concerns and hopes for climate action, reducing vehicle emissions, and incorporating a holistic approach to sustainable action.
Very good.
In the category of community project, this year's winner is the Gladys Douglas Preserve Project. Yay! This was truly a community-wide project to conserve habitat, preserve green space, rare species, sensitive ecosystems, and provide education and enjoyment for generations to come. Everyone in the community is commended for their generosity, their time, and their efforts towards this endeavor, and especially two of our crucial change makers who are here with us today. Thank you. In the category of student involvement, this year's winner is Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic School. Ms. Falcioni took it upon herself to incorporate the development of the city's first sustainability master plan into her own lesson plan and tasked the middle school science students to research and present ideas and actions they wanted to see in their community. Students submitted their research, ideas, and recommendations, and those were incorporated into DREAM, Dunedin's Resilient Environmental Action Master Plan. Thank you again. In the category of Grassroots Ambassador, we have a few different ambassadors. The first one I'd like to invite up is Sandra Rice. Sandra founded and maintains the Dunedin Buy Nothing Facebook group, which has provided an outlet for residents to repurpose items and prevent them from heading to landfill. This is a great resource that provides community connection and environmental benefits. Thank you, Sandra. Our next Grassroots Ambassador that I would like to invite up is Donna Sheridan. Over the past 10 years, Donna has collected over 6,000 bags of litter on the Dunedin Causeway. Every morning she walks and cleans up garbage and inspires others to follow suit. She is truly a hope spot protector. Our final Grassroots Ambassadors were not able to make it tonight, but I wanted to recognize Barry Powell and Mike and Valerie Fisher. They are also a part of the Hope Spot Protectors who clean up our Dunedin Causeway and make it the beautiful place that it is. And before I give a final and collective round of applause and congratulate all of our heroes, I'd like to give special recognition to the other nominations that came through, as all of them are deserving of recognition. So Hot Tots, Jennifer Graham, Kim Sauls-Begay, Dixie Sparks, and George Bird. Now join with me in congratulating our 2022 Dunedin Environmental Heroes.
Thank you very much, Natalie. We really appreciate it. And you know, I know I can speak for all of us, we really appreciate folks taking time out of their day to make their community better in some way. You know, a lot of other communities are struggling to get, our neighbors just to the south are struggling to try to get something going for their dream project, if you will, or their environmental master plan. And we've been working on, I think we were one of the first cities in the county to have a sustainability coordinator position. And that was in 2007, I think it was created. It's a big deal, and Dunedin has always put the environment at the forefront, whether it's physical or chemical or whatever. You know, we want to be good stewards, and it's one of our epic goals. We want to be the statewide model, and it takes a village, just like with children, with the environment, it takes a village. So we just want to congratulate every one of you and thank you so much for all the hard work, and keep it going.
And Mayor, remember, we do have an award-winning dream plan.
Yes, we do.
Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council.
Yes, we do.
Well done.
Thank you very much. Okay, so anyone that was here just for those things, you are more than welcome to get up and go. Hint, hint. No, I'm teasing.
Really want to stay?
Yeah, unless you really want to stay for the public hearings, I don't want you to feel like you have to do that.
You're more than welcome to.
Yeah, take your baby home.
Yeah.
Nice to see you, Michelle.
I'm not really sure if they know that you all can afford to purchase Jerry Lake. I told them you were.
Oh, I bet you they don't.
They don't?
They probably don't.
Too late.
Don't know what.
That we purchased Jerry Lake, or that we're
Oh, my gosh.
in that process anyway.
Well, you can call them back.
No, it'll take a while to get them out.
There's a whole group out there waiting to come in.
Yep.
Good thing we're going to have a new city hall soon.
Oh, my gosh.
I know.
Congratulations, Jeff.
Yeah, good job, Jeff.
Good job.
This is our award. It's,
Oh, I know. You're a champion.
thank you, but in commissions past.
You're a champion.
You're a champion.
And it's a ghost pepper, so now I need to make salsa.
A ghost pepper? Oh my gosh. Have fun with that.
If
I thought-
I
Would be dead in a
I thought it was a porthos.
Yeah, don't ever give me a plant.
porthos,
A porthos.
what's a porthos?
Well, I'm looking for one.
Oh. If I see a porthos, I'll let you know.
If one walks by,
Yeah. I'll point it in your direction.
yeah, point it in my direction.
Okay. Okay. All right. Guys, I need you to be quiet. Okay? Thank you. All right. This is for citizen input. Anyone wishing to speak to any item that is not on the agenda. If the item's on the agenda, you'll get the appropriate time to speak at that time. Anyone want to come forward and speak to anything that is not already on the agenda? Come on down.
John Shine, Dunedin DNA, 217 Aberdeen Street. I'd just like to say a couple things. The DNA had our first community event, the Architecture Diversity Month. It was an astounding event, very amazing. We have those signs out in front of many, many houses, over 50 houses, and you're welcome to tour the neighborhood and actually see all the diverse and amazing architecture. The next event that we're having, community event, is May 15th. It is a walk for dementia or Alzheimer's. It's a small walk. It's version 1.0, minimum viable product. You just have to start it downtown and walk with us down to Union and walk back on the trail. You don't have to run. You don't have to get anyone to donate. You don't have to donate any money. This is just our first version, just a walk, get everybody used to doing some things. And then finally, I'm going to partially blame Jeff Gow for this, is he posted something about townhomes and the growth of townhomes in downtown. And that is a concern of ours as well at the DNA. And so what we'd like to do is propose an idea, and it's just an idea right now, of creating barriers or smart barriers or cul-de-sacs between version 1 or phase 1 would be between Broadway and Douglas, starting from downtown moving forward. Actually closing the streets and putting parks, making it so that it's easy to get up and down via the trail, but putting sound barriers and parks and trees between what is now primarily single-family residential and what will soon be on Douglas, primarily townhomes and commercial. So we think it's a good way to manage parking, manage traffic, manage safety on the trail. It's a good way to manage growth. It's a good way to do a lot of different things. So put together a mini just thought idea associated with that. I don't know how ideas get moved forward, but I did something for everyone here because I know we're all looking for solutions to growth in our neighborhood, and I thought that potentially looking at managing traffic flow, parking, and putting sound barriers in might be a good start.
Okay, so you could just give Rebecca
give
all of that
everybody
information.
Sure.
All right, thank you, John. Anyone else wish to come forward and speak to any item that is not on the agenda? Rebecca. David? Hi.
Good evening. David Ballard Geddes Jr. I live on Georgia Avenue up the street in Palm Harbor. As I posted on a Facebook post in regards to the mangroves on the north end of Honeymoon Island, the mangroves on the north end of Honeymoon Island have systematically been dying off, or someone has been systematically killing off the mangroves, and as a result, the beach has been eroding due to the root structures that are giving way due to the fact that the mangroves are dying. Now, the mangroves aren't dying uniformly up and down the coastline. They're dying just in pertinent areas such as the north end of Honeymoon Island. Now, I'm not blind to the fact that the sands on the beach constantly shift. I've lived here long enough to know that. But the erosion that's taking place on the north end of Honeymoon Island, I feel is a direct result of the mangroves dying, or I suspect something nefarious, such as an herbicide, is being used on those mangroves to get those mangroves to die, so thereby the beach will give way as a result of that. And that's not called climate change. That's called manipulation. So I don't want to confuse climate change with someone deliberately causing beach erosion through the killing of the vegetation on the north end of Honeymoon Island. And
David, have you reported this to the Park Service, the state? Because, you know, the city of Dunedin, I mean, we can certainly notify them too, but I know that they actually have an environmental master plan as well, and I can tell you that they're not spraying any chemicals on there.
it looks like eco-terrorism to me.
But anyway,
Thank you
these,
for allowing me to.
sure, and we'll make sure we pass that on as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else wish to speak to any item that's not already on the agenda? Okay. Just a reminder of everybody, we will be having our presentations and have some of our dialogue, and then each item that's coming up, we will open it up for public hearing. If you have not already done so, please fill out a card. I believe they're out in the lobby there. And you have 3 minutes. You'll announce your name and address, and you'll be given 3 minutes. Or you can speak for a group and have 5 people sign, but they all must be present. And you'll get 10 minutes, right? Yep, okay. All right, so our first action item is the second reading of Ordinance 2207 of the City of Dunedin, providing an overlay framework in our development code. I'm not going to read the ordinance yet, or the title yet, because in case there's any changes or anything, I want to leave it till the end. All right, so George, welcome.
Mayor, if I may.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. On the agenda this evening is second and final reading of two ordinances. The first, 2207, establishes the overlay, as the Mayor had said, the overlay category in our Land Development Code. And the second, which is Ordinance 2208, establishes a South Dunedin character overlay. And we did split up the PowerPoint this time to address, first of all, 2207 and then 2208. So between first reading, which was April 7th, as you recall, it was a long evening for everybody in the audience and for us as well. A great deal of work has been done on the ordinance to address the comments and the concerns that were made both by the City Commission and by your constituents who spoke to you during the course of that public hearing. The direction of the Commission to staff was really very clear. You said keep it simple, you said keep it fair, and show us examples. And I believe that we've done all of those things. But the first thing that I want to make very clear is that before you this evening is a much better ordinance, and that's as a direct result of those comments that were made during the course of the reading on April 7th, as well as the City Commission discussion amongst the five of you. And really, that's the way all of this works with an ordinance at first and second reading. First reading of an ordinance is that first look by the public. It is, and the City Commission together, all of us in a room looking at the ordinance together. That's first reading. It is a first chance of the City Commission has had to hear directly from the public at large, and it is a first chance that you've had to review the ordinance and to talk amongst yourselves as elected officials. So, and that's sunshine. That's the way that works. In regards specifically to the second ordinance, which is 2208, Mayor, I'd like to just take them both together, and then I'll stand down here. George Kitty, who is our Director of Community Development, and he will be here with Philip from Kimley Horn, who's actually stuck in traffic at this point. Apparently there are a couple accidents, so we expect him any minute now. But George is going to describe in detail the changes that we're recommending to the ordinance to address the comments that were made at first reading. And then the rest of the presentation is abbreviated because all of you have heard that information before and many members of the public have heard it as well. Some of them 3 or 4 times at this point. But before I hand it over to George, I want to say that staff's work effort in the intervening period between first and second reading has been to continue to strive toward that middle ground and to infuse this ordinance with reasonableness. And with reasonableness through exemptions and through clarifications as well, just so people can understand them a little bit better within the body of the ordinance. And while some do oppose it, most certainly, and I certainly respect their position entirely, I do think that the ordinance meets the intent to further the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan relating to compatibility and preserving neighborhood character. And keep in mind, please, as you consider this ordinance this evening, that compatibility aspect has been in our comprehensive plan, which we believe since 1974. So it's always been an important part of how we govern within the city of Dunedin. The ordinance further states the standards herein are designed to protect the character of South Dunedin's neighborhoods by ensuring that new construction is compatible in scale, in bulk, in design, and architecture of existing neighborhoods, while respecting property rights and observing the underlying zoning districts. And that's the purpose and intent of Ordinance 2208 before you this evening. And with that, Mayor, I'll turn it over to George.
Thank you, Jennifer. George?
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you, Jennifer. So I'm going to start out with Ordinance 2207. It's a one-slide presentation, so this one will be very brief. But as you know, 2207 includes the framework for establishing character overlays in other parts of the city if a citizen effort is initiated or if a commission initiated effort is driven forward. It codifies a method to establish future character overlay districts consistent with the purposes, goals, policies, and objectives of the city's enacted comprehensive plan, as Jennifer just mentioned. And it provides guidance related to purpose, intent, objectives, criteria, and procedure. And I want to emphasize guidance. So certainly a future overlay is going to take the shape and form of whatever that negotiation process or whatever that development review process produces. But this offers some guidance to allow a community or a citizenry or the commission to move forward with other character overlays throughout the city. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions on 2207.
Any question on 2207?
Nope.
No? Okay.
I'd like to ask just a quick one.
Sure.
Would you explain, just in a brief way, that if a citizen group wishes to drive something like this, how does that occur, and is it different from how it would occur from the commission standpoint?
No, it would be the same, Commissioner, and it's really prescribed in that framework. I believe it speaks to 25 continuous parcels, and then kind of identifying the issues or the items that you want to address within that range of folks that petition the commission. But the process would essentially be the same.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we do have a few cards for this. Amy Huber. Amy has 10 minutes.
I will not take 10 minutes on this one. Good evening, Amy Huber, 536 Scotland Street. I spoke to you last time regarding this ordinance, and the same two concerns still prevail. The primary one is it talks about the intent to be citizen-driven, but it doesn't identify how citizens or a group of citizens need to bring that action forward, because I think the majority of the citizens and homeowners here would not want the same process to continue. Section 509 in your charter identifies a citizen-driven petition, and so we think that language should be incorporated into this ordinance, that if it is citizen-driven, it has to follow your charter and can't violate that. The other item that I identified last time is you have 4 standard criteria that have to be met in order to create an overlay district. One of the additional criteria is the distinct architectural character present in the defined area. We think that needs to be a required criteria, not just a throwaway additional criteria. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, David Geddes.
Hi, thank you again. David Ballard Geddes Jr., Georgia Avenue in Palm Harbor up the street. I question, does this overlay have anything to do with creating or imposing or overlaying a separate legal entity atop of our existing government based on Chapter 163 of the Florida statutes? Are there any third-party acquisitions, entitlements, variances, or third-party interlocal fee simple title transfers or integrated jurisdictional manifestations, latches, or third-party eminent domain proceedings, undertakings placed against residentially owned properties in this overlay before us tonight? Based on Pinellas County Home Rule Charter, Section 2.04Q, are there any political transfers of function and power contained within such overlay? Does the downtown redevelopment plan have anything to do with the redistricting that's taking place in Tallahassee based on Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the U.S. Constitution? I have a lot of questions regarding
The answer is no to all of
future
it.
imposement
Yeah,
of this.
the answer is no to all of it.
Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you, David. Okay, Deborah Bushnell.
Deborah Bushnell, 645 Loudon Avenue. The city manager has informed us all that we've had compatibility requirements in our comprehensive plan since 1974, which is amazing. We have had no way to implement them, no way to structurally analyze whether something is compatible with the surroundings, what surrounding areas. That needs to be incorporated in the code. This is a way to do that, not only in one area of the city, but in multiple areas of the city potentially. And I think that that option is important to have structurally within our code, and I would urge the commissioners to approve it.
Thank you, Deborah. And Deborah Matthew.
mostly what I'm going to say is thank you. As someone whose family's been here since 1910 and lives in an old section of town at 646 Scotland Street in Dunedin, sorry I forgot to say that. I, even in my lifetime, let alone my great-grandparents' lifetime, have watched Dunedin change. I've also watched it change its flavor when it was falling apart and dying slowly. And you can look at pockets of Dunedin where you can see things that don't fit, but that happened during the late 60s and very early 70s. So instead of just throwing up our hands, we can say, how can we keep Dunedin a community? And having an overlay, and I won't speak at the next part, I promise. But living in an area where you have gigantic houses with no yard, and looking down on houses that have been there for 70 years, 1,200 square feet, maybe big house was 1,500 square feet. It is hard to keep that community spirit and protect us and keep us a town. So many people have moved here because they just think it's a charming little town. But if we become a charming little town of mansions, we have lost that spirit. And so I appreciate your response to how can we, in a fair way, kind of protect our city. So thank you for your hard work.
Thank you very much. Okay, can you pass that down? We'll come back to the commission. And I guess what I'll do is open it up for dialogue. Vice Mayor, anything you want to add? This is the first one.
I thought, isn't she going to read it?
Well, I wasn't going to do that unless I was going to have the discussion first, in case anybody had a change.
I don't have any changes.
Okay.
I do have a question. On the first reading on 2208, we talked about if it were to pass and if it passes tonight.
That's 08. This
That's
is
the
07.
next.
I know.
Okay.
We talked about we would revisit that ordinance in some period of time, a year from now or whatever, to make sure that we were doing what was right. And if 2207 is giving the residents an opportunity to do it in other neighborhoods, and this might not be the appropriate place to ask the question, but then we're almost using 2208 as kind of an experiment. Are we doing this right? And I'm wondering if with 2207, are we going to get a flood of residents in other neighborhoods asking for some sort of overlay in their neighborhood when we don't know whether this is going to work or not, or at least, and I'm speaking personally just for me, I don't know if it's going to work or not. And so I don't know whether there can be a delay in 2207 to let residents hold back to see if this kind of overlay works, or it is what it is and we deal with it when it comes.
Wow.
I just thought about that tonight, so I'm sorry if it's kind of.
Can I sort of tag on? That's what we call it. But the bottom line is, it's a tool.
Right.
It's only a tool. And it would be driven, as George said, by many of the things that we've done since 2017 with gathering people from the community to get their feeling and what their concerns were. So, I understand you are thinking ahead, but it's a tool. And it would be a tool for compatibility in our comprehensive plan to carry out something that's been going on since 1974. So, those are my feelings. You are totally, you have your own feelings.
And I'm not yay or nay on 2207. I'm just, what does it mean when we say yes? And we all seem to be in agreement, at least on first reading, about coming back in a year with 2208 to make sure we got it right. So what happens between tonight and a year from now in other neighborhoods? I'm just.
Well, I think we can bring them both back. I don't think that's a problem.
Well,
But who knows if George is going to have another neighborhood that actually follows it. I mean, you do have outlined procedures there.
So I think specific, my view, Commissioner, I appreciate the discussion, is that some other neighborhood could come to us no matter what. So they don't need this. This just provides some guidance. And I think that's helpful because we could have 5 neighborhoods come next week without guidance, but at least this gives guidance. So I think it's helpful. I mean, I think, again, it's up to us to say how fast we move on these things based on learning and making sure that what we're trying to do is really what happens. So that's my view.
I'll make a comment that this ordinance, I'm only going to talk about this ordinance.
Yeah,
Just
please.
2207, and this was timely, shall we say, perhaps a little late, but certainly timely now that we have it, and I fully respect it. And there's been some comments, and I might even like to perhaps just look over at the attorney. There was a point made about procedure, et cetera, from the charter, but I think we're fine with this, and there is a procedure in the charter. And so I think we're fine with this document at this point in time, and that's my opinion. And
Thank you.
Your question, so.
Can someone, it talks about the procedure in Chapter 104 for legislative public hearings. Can somebody tell us what that says?
I'm pulling it up. I believe it's just your general procedures for making legislative amendments to your code.
Okay.
Because that process, just
I
like this
just- but I wanna
process,
hear
is
what-
the legislative process for amending your code.
Right.
So the
I wanna hear.
procedures are development approvals requiring legislative public hearings. So
No, I read that, but I want to hear what the process is.
The same process that we've gone through in adopting this ordinance, Mayor. So
Oh, all right, so you're saying LPA and 2 public reading? Okay.
it's a legislative process to amend the code, just
So
like
they simply
2208 is.
So they simply have to come in and talk to George or whomever
I think-
about wanting to do what they want to do, do,
Mayor, if I
and,
may, I think that if a neighborhood were to come in, and it would be a number of residents, that we would certainly look at what it is they want to do, what distinctive features they have in their neighborhood, either natural features, architectural, just as described within this ordinance, and really assess whether or not an overlay is appropriate for that area, or not appropriate for that area, or there's something else that we can do to help that particular neighborhood. And then move forward from there. I mean, this was obviously a very long process. It was not quick. But it really is something that's not just going to pop up. I mean, there's going to be a lot of work involved and a lot of work with the neighborhood involved as well before it even comes anywhere near the city commission.
well, and the reason I'm asking is because, someone was suggesting a different process, and that was a petition process, which is for something completely
Right.
different.
Correct.
Referendum election. she was
Yeah.
talking- Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So I just wanted to hear what the process was. So simply the group would come in and make an appointment with George and sit down and talk about what they want to do.
Correct.
And go through the various requirements or things that, and that's how it would get started.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
May I?
Sure.
If we wished, if the commission wished, and/or if someone from staff wished, we could look into something like this.
We could if it were the appropriate mechanism for the
Correct.
issue within that neighborhood.
Correct.
Yes.
But primarily driven by the residents.
Yes, in much the same way that staff, the city commission can initiate a land development code amendment as well, and often
Correct.
does.
It's a
Yes.
good analogy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or feedback? All right, Nikki, would you please read ordinance 2207 by title only?
Yes, Mayor. Ordinance number 2207, an ordinance of the City of Dunedin, Florida, amending the Land Development Code, City of Dunedin, Division 3, Overlay Zoning Districts to incorporate Section 103.31.3, establishing the C character overlay as a general type of overlay district, providing for codification, publication, and severability, and providing for an effective date. Mayor and Commissioners, this has been reading of Ordinance 2207 on second reading by title only.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Vice Mayor Kynes, and can I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Franny. Okay, any final comments?
No, not at this time.
No. Again, it's a guideline.
Thank you.
It's a tool.
It's a tool.
Any
slash
final
guideline.
comments? Okay. I do think it is pretty simple to understand how to go about doing this. And it really isn't any different than any other item that that someone in our community would want to see us address. They call the appropriate people, they make an appointment, we sit down, talk about it. So I don't think it has to be that complicated. And even if if I were sitting in a neighborhood and had an issue, I would pick up the phone and I would call the community development department and I would say, talk me through this document and give me some, even developers do that. Before they develop, they'll call you and ask you about the zoning and, before they go down a road. I think people will understand what they need to do, very simply.
Absolutely, Mayor. And I think also just to add on, this adds the opportunity to be flexible with respect to the context of whatever that situation is.
Exactly, and that's what I was just going to say, because, I know somebody mentioned making architectural character and stuff as a requirement, but it may be a completely different situation. Every situation is different. It could be, it could be a historic district, it could be a coastal neighborhood, it just could be completely, so, to keep the flexibility there, I think is important, especially when you're creating laws, not everything is the same, so. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Twanga?
Aye.
Commissioner Gao?
Aye.
Commissioner Praney?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kynes?
Aye.
Mayor Brzezowski?
Aye, that motion passes unanimously. Okay. Now we're on the second ordinance, 2208, which is establishing the South Dunedin character overlay. Anything else you wanted to add, Jennifer?
Nothing further, Mayor. Thank you.
George?
Thank you, Commissioners, Mayor, Vice Mayor. Again, George Kinney on behalf of the Community Development Department. So ordinance 2208 really speaks to the implementation of compatibility standards to define geographic area, and that's exactly what we're talking about here with the South Douglas character overlay. South Downtown character overlay. The ordinance does, as it's currently proposed, establish a daylight plane standard, design standards, and architectural standards. I'm going to kind of walk through a more abbreviated version than the first read because I want to kind of get to the pieces that we discussed between first and second and kind of hit on those for you. But very quickly, just going back through some of the chronology, I think Jennifer, the city manager, hit on this already. But, this had been a long process beginning in 2017 with some visioning exercises, followed by a citizen survey in 2019, some feedback from the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee in 2019, and then really getting into what we're talking about tonight. Kimley Horn was brought on board back in 2019, conducted a few neighborhood meetings, as you can see here on the slide, both in July and November of 2019. In December 10 of 2019, a commission workshop was held where Kimley Horn laid out some of the alternative strategies that could be employed to start to think about incorporating our compatibility standards. And those range from voluntary rezoning opportunities all the way to full-scale adjustments in the land development code itself. And where this landed is obviously with an overlay, with the character overlay, which again preserves those underlying development rights, but provides some of that direction from the comp plan into actual codified language. More recently, this is the actual event chronology of the Character Overlay District. It began in April 13 of 2021 with a City Commission workshop. You can see the stakeholder and public meetings that have occurred in between leading up to the April 7 first reading. And I just want to mention here that I think our outreach efforts with respect to this were actually extraordinary. I've been in planning for 30 years. We direct mailed every resident that resides in the Character Overlay District, and we did that on several occasions for each of the public meetings. So the outreach effort, I think, was exhaustive, and I think it shows with the folks that we see that have come and have expressed their opinion. What this all boils down to from a planning perspective, from our planning perspective, is the comprehensive plan and those compatibility provisions. And I'm not going to go through them all again, but again, the takeaway is, this has been a citizen-driven process since 2017 with respect to implementing compatibility provisions. And that policy, as Jennifer has mentioned, has been there for a very long time. And this is really about trying to find a balanced approach to incorporating those standards while preserving underlying development rights. Again, very quickly, I just want to hit on the zoning categories that are included in the overlay district. They are MF 7.5, which is multifamily residential, 7.5 units per acre. MF 15, which is multifamily residential, 15 units an acre. And R60, which is the single-family residential with 6,000 square foot minimum lot areas. We walked through this a little more detail at the last meeting, but again, determining development entitlements for individuals that have properties in this area. It's a process where you're really looking at a number of different documents and items, including the land use that underpins a particular property, the zoning that lies on a particular property, whether or not a property lies within or without or in or out of a floodplain. And we'll talk a little bit again about those additional standards and some of the corrections we made between first read and second read. I just left this slide up to just remind everybody that it's really easy to kind of go in and see what you've got on your property. We have a single dedicated website page that offers several links. The first link would be to an interactive map where you can dial down into your property. The second link would provide a use matrix so you can see what's permitted and what's not permitted from a use perspective on the property. The third link is really the meat of what we're talking about now, the zoning standards or dimensional standards, which is really a big portion of your development rights. And the fourth link is a future land use element where you can go into a property and see what kind of density you're permitted based on whatever that underlying land use is. Very quickly, just a reminder of the properties that we're talking about here again are R60, and really the meat of the R60 provisions are the setback provisions and the height provisions, which are highlighted here. Minimum front yard setback in R60 is 25 feet. Minimum side yards are 7.5 feet. Minimum rear yard is 20 feet, and height maximum in R60 is 27 feet. For MF 7.5, the minimum front yard 25. Again, side yard setbacks the same at 7.5 feet. Minimum rear yards are 20 feet, and height maximum in this particular district is 35 feet. MF 15, minimum front yard setback is 25 feet. Minimum side yard setbacks for single family are 7.5 feet. That increases to 10 feet if you have a multifamily development. Minimum rear yard setback is 20 feet, and height maximums are 50 feet. One of the things that was requested at the last meeting was how does the plan apply with respect to being a property that's in a flood zone versus a property that's outside of a flood zone. This is the same home, if you will, embedded into the daylight plane. This graphic kind of shows how that works. So on the left-hand portion of the slide, you can see a property that would have no floodplain. The daylight plane would extend 15 feet up and angle in at 45 degrees. Property on the right is a property that's in the floodplain, and you can see where that 15 feet starts at the design build elevation, so it doesn't start at grade. And you have actually the same exact box with the same mass inside of that daylight plane box. And this is just another example. I think we showed this at the last meeting. This is a property. This is an actual example where we had somebody come in and just kind of, we did a back of the napkin kind of sketch, but it is to scale. And I apologize for the condition of the visual, but basically this is a lot that's 91 feet wide. If you incorporate the two 7.5-foot side yard setbacks, you find you have 76 feet of building width in order to construct a building. When you implement the daylight plane, in this case, it was 25 feet because it was an MF 15 property. You can see as you get closer to the center of the lot with any construction, you can start to make full use of that site as you move towards the center of the lot. In this case, there's 27 feet to start to work with a centered property. We talked a little bit about the process at the last meeting. From our perspective, this will be fairly simple to administer. It's simply some additional requirements that would be requested of the design professional. We would look at those requirements against this ordinance if it was adopted, and we would move the permit through the exact same way that we currently do. Now, to kind of jump into some of the changes that were made. So one of the things, before I do that, get specific, I want to talk a little bit about the flexibility. And a lot of this was already in the first iteration. And really, this is just provided, the changes that were made were really for clarifying purposes. So they weren't substantive at all. They were simply clarifying provisions. But for each of the three main sections, this slide kind of talks about what applies and what doesn't apply. So in the daylight plane provision, the daylight plane would not apply to setback encroachments that are listed in our current land development code table 103-50.1. This is an exception requirement that wasn't linked to in the first plan, but it offers more flexibility for property owners for exemptions on certain types of items that are noted in that table. That, along with the exceptions that were already in, including roof overhangs, dormers, antenna, and when adjacent to non-residential property, provides in all 35 exceptions to the daylight plane. And I would also add that the daylight plane provision itself provides flexibility in determining if a property is irregular, and then we have the ability to kind of look at that from an administrative perspective and decide whether or not the property is even subject to the daylight plane. From a second section perspective, building design, additions to the existing structure are exempt from building orientation and garage carport placement. I know that was a big question. So when we're talking about an existing structure and we're talking about building, the building orientation provisions and the garage and carport placement provisions, those are exempt. You're exempt from those if you have an existing property. And you're not, so this is really meant to apply to substantial improvements and new development. And then again, as was mentioned at the first reading, an Architecture Review Committee recommendation may be pursued for any other unusual circumstance where not exempt. So it just gives you a lot of opportunity to work with us in a pre-application type setting or otherwise to really, we're going to be here to try and get that project done, but we want to get it done in a way that serves this compatibility standard. And then finally, from an architectural style, again, additions to existing structures are exempt. So there are no architectural styles that would apply to a home that's doing an addition. Now, you still have to complement the current home style. So, and that's always been the case. But you are exempt from those architectural requirements if you're just adding on or if you're doing small additions or whatever the case might be. And again, an Architecture Review Committee recommendation may be made pursuant to any unusual circumstances where it might not be exempt or if an alternative style is desired. So a lot of room in there, a lot of flexibility in there. So that is the main part of the changes in summary. More specifically, from a commission perspective, one of the things we were asked to do at the last meeting was look at a few things, and I just kind of want to offer our conclusions with respect to those reviews. The first was review the daylight plane measurement requirement for clarity, and that was under section 103.32.2A4 of the proposed ordinance, and where it references the land development code for looking at height measurements. We are recommending that provision remain as currently written. We believe that that helps. So if there are changes in the land development code, those are automatically reflected in the overlay, and we don't have to worry about going back in and changing both. And we actually think it's clear and pretty straightforward. With respect to number 2, show the daylight plane application in a floodplain and not in a floodplain. You saw the exhibit, but Kimley Horn has also prepared a couple of exhibits that are in Exhibit L. I'm sorry.
They were supplements.
Yes, in the supplement. With respect to number 3, clarify the form of development, redevelopment prompting the daylight plane. We clarified that language with Nikki's help. We actually rearranged the definition section to provide what I think is a more clear and concise definition section, which includes the terms of redevelopment and development specifically in them. Number 4 was consider architectural standard applications to single-family residential use. I think, again, what we've done is tried to clarify when those styles would be applicable and when they wouldn't, and that kind of goes back to C on the slide that is before you. And then the number 5 was provide visuals that show certain style homes within the daylight plane, and Kimley Horn will follow my presentation and will show you the graphics that they have prepared to address that. So again, I would just, I want to reiterate that this clarifying language noted is not substantive, and it's really intended to provide for clarification and ease of use. We think we've appropriately addressed all the questions and requests, and we are, as a staff, recommending the commission approve this ordinance 22-08, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions for George? Let's start on this end.
I don't have any.
John?
Yeah, I do, but I probably would have liked to have seen that extension first, but so.
What extension?
The illustrations.
Oh, is he going to show something?
He will follow me.
Okay, then we'll. Okay, sorry.
If you're ready, I can.
Yes, please.
Just might take a second to get him loaded here.
You can probably flip direct to those slides.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Philip DiMaria, Certified Planner with Kimley Horn, for the record. Good to be here once again tonight. George did a very thorough job, so we'll be quick and we'll get right to the point as far as seeing some of the additional exhibits. But just for clarity, we attempted in this presentation and with the additional materials just to clarify either through additional exhibits, through supportive text, or through modifying the text to be more specific about some of the questions that you all had. Just walking through a lot of what we already covered. Here's the exhibit that George showed as well, expanding on the application of floodplains and the daylight plane within those floodplains. A little bit of a portmanteau with flood and plain there. But you'll see on the right side just that what we would call freeboard, and that would be the gap between the finished floor elevation and finished grade. And that blue area showcases that additional height, and it also would push the daylight plane starting measurement a little bit higher as well. This specific item, and there was a commenter in the previous hearing in the first reading that asked where exactly the section was. I just highlighted it here, section 103.403, which is in the existing land development code of Dunedin, that reflects the allotted building height based on floodplains. And here's the specific language within that land development code reference. There was also some discussion about where development and redevelopment made sense. And in the new ordinance that you see before you tonight, there have been some updates that clarify existing structures, additions to existing structures, as George mentioned, versus brand new development and major renovations. We look to provide additional visuals and examples. Part of the discussion was how could a two-story Craftsman fit within the box? We took a few architectural examples here to show some very specific examples to scale of how a home or structure could fit within these daylight planes. So the first is going to be a coastal vernacular building that's 2 stories. There's, once again, that blue area is the building envelope. and that's what a two-story coastal vernacular building would look like within that building envelope. Keep in mind that within this area and within the city of Dunedin, with pitched roofs, it's measured at the midpoint of the roof. The second example is a craftsman-style home. That's what we're calling 1.5 stories, where it has a small upper floor. But that fits amply within that daylight plane. It's actually the top of the roof. That fits within the daylight plane. And then here's a 2-story example of a craftsman-style home fitting within that daylight plane as well. We're providing some additional visuals and examples of mid-century ranch with the and allotting for some additional flexibility within that category as well. Looking at some of the styles of craftsman-style homes, you can see here, those are placed within the ordinance. Coastal vernacular homes, Mediterranean revival homes, and finally, second to last, French Creole homes and Anglo-Caribbean structures as well. The last major item that was discussed was speaking specifically to R60 and whether or not maintaining architectural styles and required architectural styles made sense within R60. What the professional recommendation is that you incorporate it as part of the third leg, but really it could be seen as a policy level decision. I've got 3 examples here of more modern style homes that would fit within a daylight plane, and if those are if those could be seen as being consistent with the character of South Dunedin, then certainly potentially allowing these within the R60 categories through the removal of architectural standards could be an option. But the purpose and the spirit behind a lot of what was written in the ordinance was really to focus on maintaining the character within South Dunedin, and that becomes our professional recommendation, is to maintain those architectural standards as the third leg of the stool. And that concludes the presentation.
Okay. I'll start back here again. Good. Any questions?
No, it does appear, though, that when you fit into the box for the styles, you're basically skinny up the whole house. So depending on the lot that you have, that will kind of define how much square footage you end up with, correct?
That's correct. I think to a certain extent, yes, the skinnying up of the lot through the side yard setbacks, it would certainly limit the upper stories based on the daylight plane. But the intention was, with the height of that leg, was to allow for a very similar amount of square footage on a first floor as you would have today.
Thank you.
John?
I'm going to take a little bit of time, but I won't be overbearing about this. George, would you just answer this? It's a question I would like to ask, not necessarily for myself. So we have an R60, we have an MF 7.5, and we have MF 15. Question, on the R60, what can be built on an R60?
From a use perspective, single family.
What can be built on it? And I'll just ask one question for the MF 7.5. I won't talk about the 15 because it's the same answer. What can be built on an MF 7.5?
Single family or multifamily.
So a person can build a single family on that and with those same dimensions, which is called the building envelope, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some other standards about the length of it and et cetera that would fit in. But so this is still working on the character, still considering the character in all cases, correct? It is.
Yes.
I just wanted to make that point so that people understood that you could build a single family, and everyone here knows that, but just in case somebody were listening that didn't.
Well, and that's a good point, Commissioner, because the point is you're not losing any of those underlying rights. So any of those permitted uses, conditional uses, special exception uses, they're all still there. Nothing's lost as a result of this.
One more sentence, just what does 7.5 mean to that property?
It means, depending on the underlying land use, you can have up to 7.5 units per acre.
And you have to, you divide that by an acre, correct?
By your lot size.
So if you have half of an acre, okay, so you would have not 7.5, but you would have another number there and you round it up, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. A couple questions that I have. When we're in this floodplain, okay, and we want to move the property up, there's directions in here that tell us how we're going to do that, correct?
So the direction initially comes from FEMA through whatever their floodplain regulations are, but there are directions on where the height measurement begins for the daylight plan based on whether or not you're in or out of a floodplain.
Are we restricting how you would do that? Are we saying you have to do it one way and not another? Can you put a base on that property as opposed to a stilt? I'll just use the word stilt, as opposed to a stilt.
If you're doing a new residence or a substantial addition, you have to develop according to FEMA standards, which means your lowest floor elevation has to be at what's called the design build elevation. So that is the base flood elevation that is defined by the firm maps, by the flood insurance rate maps.
And so to go up, you have to either use a stilt or you have to increase the depth or the height of the land underneath the building, correct?
George,
Yeah,
go ahead. There is some language in there, if you don't mind handing me the ordinance. There is some language and guidance on bringing in fill and avoiding bringing in fill, which is a FEMA standard, which is what George's saying, but also just reinforcing it from a design perspective. There's talks about stem wall construction, that sort of thing. That would lend itself to more neighborhood-like character.
Is that a FEMA standard?
Not always. Depends on the flood zone.
So it's our standard that we've put into here. Is that any kind of a restriction, or is that being overly restrictive in our opinion? You've looked at that, correct? And made the decision of how we want to do that.
Yeah, we are supporting the ordinance the way it's written, so yeah, we don't think it's a standard. FEMA standards there's a couple of ways you can kind of skin the cat. So this kind of offers some additional direction on maybe how you get to that design build elevation.
And if there's any questions about that, they can go and try to get some additional assistance on this matter.
Absolutely. The floodplain administrator is located in our office. That's Mr. DePasqua. So, he's available anytime. We have a number of meetings routinely regarding design build in floodplains, and it's part of the pre-app process.
I wanted to talk about this 50% because many of us that have lived here for a long time know when on the shore, certainly, or near the water, people wanted to build bigger and better and whatever have you, but they had the 50% on the structure side. We have a 50% on the value side. So as our property values are going up, we have some folks that are saying, hey, they live in fairly small homes. They may very quickly, just by adding something really small, would they be not compromised but restricted then because it's going to change at 50, or that may be a misunderstanding? I'm not sure.
No, I think you're right, but it's really not related to this. That's occurring today under general standards. So the 50% rule applies. So it's based on the value of the property. You can't exceed 50%, otherwise FEMA considers it a substantial improvement, and the whole property has to come into compliance. And that runs on what we call a 5-year cumulative. So you can do multiple additions over a 5-year period, but you can't exceed that 50% cumulatively either. And then it resets after 5 years. So we're getting into something that's kind of...
So it's been like this ever since I can remember, correct?
Yes, that's our current.
And what we're saying is you don't have to change your style. You can stay in your style, okay? So we're not affecting that. All we're doing is saying, here's the rule that you have to apply if it's over 50%. Is that correct?
So you are exempt from the architect, it's kind of, we're kind of mixing them together, and they're really separate kinds of entities, but if the value of your proposed addition doesn't exceed 50%, just like the floodplain rules and regulations require, then you are exempt from the architectural standards, if it's an addition.
We have 6 styles here now, and I was asking that question before. And we principally, a couple of these styles were added just to give more flexibility because they don't have to be exact, correct? It's in the style, and you've got some flexibility of how, I'm gonna hold this up in a second, but we have some flexibilities. This was placed on the dais. We all got one of these. I don't know if you can see this or not, but somebody put this on here, and so I guess I have a question. It looks like it's within the plane. Does something like this pass the muster? Do you know? Would you know? Can I get that to you, or I don't know if you've seen this before. City manager.
I couldn't really answer, Commissioner, on the spot. See, the way it works when a permit comes in, the staff gets together as a group, they analyze that permit based on the existing regulations. We look at the surrounding areas as well. So without knowing that kind of information, I couldn't give you an answer tonight. I could look at it for you and bring you back an answer. But
The rules are in there, there's enough rules in there, but enough flexibility to be able to look at something like this. The main thing is the building envelope.
Well, and that's the point of the option of going to the Architecture Review Committee. So if something comes in and it doesn't hit on one of the, and we're presuming a new build here or substantial addition. If something comes in and we don't feel comfortable that it hits on one of those architectural styles, we would refer that to the Architecture Review Committee for a recommendation and feedback, and their feedback back to us. And typically what they do is that's a very informal, casual conversation, usually with the applicants, and usually applicants love it because they're getting some advice from professional architects on how to make it fit maybe a little bit better based on what's around it. So I think there's that opportunity if you're doing something substantial, if you're doing something new, and that out's there. So obviously if you clearly hit on one of those 6 architectural styles, we will just handle that permit like we would any other building permit.
I would like to make a comment about the flexibility that you've put into this. I've even had somebody tell me you have way too much flexibility in this. And someone has actually said, I just want to be told what has to go in there. I personally like the flexibility because I don't want to make rules for everybody. I don't want these folks out here that may live in, if I live in my house, I don't want you to come and say, well, you have to be, this color and this color. There's cities that do that, of course, as you well know, in the planning area. But you've given enough flexibility for me, maybe not to know exactly what I can do, but I can get enough information from you, can't I, to give me some guidance before because I could spend $100,000 on an architect. With an architect, I could spend 50 easy, right, on a fairly good sized house. We'll get some basic idea of what can go on that property. If I own, say for example, I own a piece of property, an MF 7.5, I want to put just a house on it. I would get some idea of what I could do there, even though there's a lot of flexibility.
There's no doubt. I mean, we routinely run pre-apps every day. So we've got our zoning officers here who reviews building permits, and we do pre-apps consistently all the time for that very reason. People don't want to start to invest a lot of money unless they see a path. And that's what we try to do, is help them get down that path.
And I've asked you this question several times, and you've answered it the same each time I've asked. And that is about how your office is going to be able to handle this, these flexibility issues, et cetera, and you did not see any particular problem with any of this, and you felt as though that it would move very quickly through your office. Is that not correct?
No, that's correct. Yeah, Commissioner. And in fact, I went back to my staff in the interim between first read and second read and just verified the the comfort level of the group, and they were like, why, this is fine, it's not going to be a
And I
burden.
know you and I have talked, but I've also mentioned this from up here, and that is when there's a question or a problem with this, we're gonna know this rather quickly. But specifically, as far as this ordinance goes, this specific ordinance, we talked about this up here last time, and I would want to make sure that we're watching this as we go on. And I know you said you are also not concerned, but that you would want to be able to do that, so that when we have something like this in the hopper, you feel comfortable, staff feels comfortable, or you wouldn't recommend this. We have to vote on it tonight, and we're going to vote on how comfortable we are that should something need to be changed. That I know you're going to keep records of this. You've told me that, and we're going to know what's happening with this fairly quickly. And if there's issues, I guess we'll have to handle them. Correct? We're not going to just sit and watch.
Couldn't have said it better. Excellent comment, Commissioner. I failed to mention that in my initial presentation, but yes, we are absolutely, we're going to track by each of those categories, each of those legs, if you will, and we're going to monitor everything that comes in very closely, and we'll certainly report back out to the Commission at any appropriate time, within any appropriate time frame that is deemed necessary.
I asked the city manager the same question several times in our conversations, and she has supported that, and I think your staff supports that.
Absolutely.
Is that correct?
Yes.
I mean, this is our ordinance, and then you enforce it, but there is a lot of flexibility in this. And again, I'll make the comment. You don't necessarily prefer to have flexibility, because it's easier for you if you don't have the flexibility, because then everybody can see what you have to do. But in your business, you realize that in an area like this, it is historic. We have some historical houses, we have some older homes, and this just gives the people the option of keeping that character and being together, I think. Is that not correct? Was that sort of the intention of this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you hit it.
Okay.
Hit it right on the.
All right.
On the nose.
Long questions, but thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Yes, you know, we have heard a lot about cookie cutter houses, planned unit developments, HOAs. What are the three standards for architecture per se that you're going to look at, the components?
So if you look at the listing in there,
The
under
listing.
each architectural style, there are three subcategories, if you will.
Roof,
Yeah.
roof line? I have roof line, building exterior.
So typical exterior building materials is 1, typical roof line shapes and materials is 2, and characteristic features is 3. And then of the pieces that are underneath each of those, 1 would be selected.
Correct.
But again, I want to reiterate that this is for new builds and substantial renovations, so any addition,
Additions are exempt.
they're not subject to this.
And I want to ask you again about garage carport placement. We did have some questions where it might be very difficult to put a garage in because of technical limitations on a lot. What would happen there?
It kind of goes back to the same thing. Again, we're talking about new development, so those complications are probably lessened with the new development because you're kind of starting from scratch. With respect to an addition, you know, there are ways to work through that. We actually had a gentleman come into the office a couple of days ago who wanted to look at a particular property that he's working on, and he's already incorporated some of these elements. And the garage was an issue for them, and through that discussion in that pre-app meeting, it was able to slide back and comport with the provision as it's written.
Okay, but I mean, there might be technical limitations, trees, and I think it says the structure. If the structure is unable to meet the requirements, a property owner may request the zoning administrator seek an executive recommendation from the Architectural Review Committee. Is that correct?
Great point. That's where I was going to go next, was there's always that avenue then. If we can't make it fit neatly and completely, then we can use the architectural review.
Because there may be technical limitations. So
Absolutely.
there is an exemption in that case.
And for
And
the-
help to go to the Architectural Review Committee.
Right.
Another thing that I think was really interesting, I know we had a lot of talk about additions. Additions are exempt unless they hit the 50%, and which is required under FEMA. correct? You've been through that with Commissioner Tornga. If they hit that they're going to add more than 50%, then it flips to a FEMA rule, because that makes it a new development. Is that correct?
So the 50% rule is written into the definition of redevelopment in here.
Correct.
And it's irregardless of whether it's in a floodplain or not in a floodplain.
Okay,
The floodplain regs stand on their own.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I was scrambling there too. So it's just if they build more than 50% of the value of the home, then it would come under some of these regulations, correct?
Yes.
But if it's just an addition, it would not. Is that correct?
Less than 50% of the
Less
value
than
of the home, yes.
50%, correct. Okay, Jennifer, you and I have had a lot of discussion about this, and, what if you've got your roof line, you've got your building exterior, you have your character features from the respective building types, and Mr. Demara?
Close enough.
Close enough. I think you talked about, okay, you have protein, you have vegetables, can you elaborate? Because people can sort of get that, because you have a smorgasbord of things that you can put together.
That's right.
And so it's a buffet. It's not a tapas, right?
Oh my God, you're going to confuse the hell out of me.
Yeah, now I'm hungry. Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
More food analogies.
Smorgasbord.
No, but you're absolutely correct in all seriousness. I mean, the fact of the matter is that there are 6 architectural styles to work from, just to begin with.
Just to begin with.
Just to begin with. Then within each of those architectural styles, there are 3 categories in which folks can select and mix and match, if needed, to get their particular building constructed.
And so you can mix and match, is what I'm trying to get at. You can actually mix and match from the various 6 styles. As to roof line,
No, I don't think you can. No, you can't do that.
No, it's an individual style that you have.
Okay, you can mix and match from the individual style, but if you say this, I would like to go with this style, but then I might add a fenestration or whatever that's not of this style, would they go to ARC?
They could.
They could go to ARC, correct. So if they said, maybe I want to do part of this style will be my main style, but then I want to look at something that could come from another style, then they have the direct executive decision that they may go to ARC and work with them. Is that correct? Architectural Review Committee.
Yes.
Yeah, that was my,
Mayor,
those are my questions.
Vice Mayor, if I may. I think that we're concentrating a lot on the process and those 6 architectural styles, and it's really not that complicated, to be honest with you. There are within those 6 styles, there are a number of different architectural features that they could include in their building, and you're going to have an architect involved. And traditionally, if you're building a home, you're going to come in and talk to staff first, or your architect will. And usually a lot of the architects are from this area as well, and we know them all very well. And we would look at that particular style, whatever it is, and then look at those elements. Is it this, is it this, is it that? And if one is missing, then we would work with them to ensure that that is within the building itself, and then move the permit along. So we're not looking for ways not to approve the permit. We're looking for ways to approve the permit. And I think that that's really important because, to the point that someone made it during the public hearing a few weeks ago, there are still not that many permits that have run through. We're really looking at the future. The vast majority of people sitting here won't even be subject to this ordinance because unless they do a substantial improvement on their home or they're doing a complete redevelopment or a new build. Correct. So, and I've said this before, I'm in this overlay and I'm not planning on doing anything to my home and I'm not even gonna know it exists, the overlay itself. So I think that it's really important that their rights are in play and are in place. But the process itself is not going to be as cumbersome as people are assuming they're going to be. And the other point is that the Architectural Review Committee is not a board, they're a committee. And they make a recommendation to the zoning administrator and it's an executive recommendation. And that's important because those architects are local. And those landscape architects, they live here. They know this town, they know the south side, they know what we're looking for. And, the executive recommendation of the zoning administrator, then, if he disagrees with that and says no, then it can go to the Board of Adjustment and Appeal. So there's an inherent process here to get to yes somehow at some point. And I think that that's the most important part. But in getting to yes, you're not, at that point, the thing that you're trying to build is not going to overshadow or not be compatible with your neighbors. And I think that that's the most important part of this. It's going to be a process to get to yes. So thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And so the Architectural Review Committee is a volunteer board, is that correct?
Yes.
And they are architects. They are landscape architects, they are interior design people, they are architects.
That's just right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And Vice Mayor, if I may, the Architectural Review Committee, a lot of people don't know this, has been in place since 2017, reviewing everything that goes through a design review, which is more than 5,000 square feet and more than 5 units. And a lot of people, 6 units, a lot of people didn't even know it was in play because it didn't affect them. And I think that you have to remember that same point here as well. So thank you.
But one last question. This would be the first time unless it was over 5, unless it was over, what's your bottom line where you have?
5,000 square feet or 6 units.
6,000 square feet or 5 units.
But this would be the first time that residential really has an exempted way to go to Architectural Review Committee.
Yes.
That's the first time with these regulations that allows them that capability.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Commissioner?
No questions.
Okay. So in the, I've already asked you this question, I'm just going to ask it again. Throughout this, we're saying that the way to get something that isn't necessarily in this code would be to go to the Board of Adjustment and Appeal, correct?
We would go to the Architectural Review Committee.
No, I know, but I'm saying they want to do something different.
So what we would do is we would try to work through the Architectural Review Committee first to see if the Architectural Review Committee could get them to.
No, I get it. But let's just say they want a completely different style and they don't care what the Architectural Review says.
The next leg would be the Board of Adjustment and Appeal.
Okay.
Well, actually, the next, they make a recommendation to the zoning administrator, and that's George. And if George concurs that this is not compatible, is not in the style, then their appeal is to the Board of Adjustment and Appeal.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay. Which I get. But it's not for everything. There is one thing in here that would end up coming to us, and that's if they go more than the 60 feet. And that's when you combine the two lots, right? It's not a single lot.
Or 3, right?
Yeah, 2 or 3, yeah, but multiple lots.
Right.
Correct.
If it's a single-family lot and they want to build bigger, is that coming to us too?
If they don't exceed the 60 feet, no. So you would only see anything that is 60 feet in width or greater. Everything else would be looked at by the Architectural Review Committee as a first round.
No, I get it, but let's say somebody wants to build something that the height and the mass is not as prescribed here. And you say to them, no, can't do it. And they say,
I got you.
I
Yeah,
wanna
that's
get-
just, that's like any dimensional standard. So
Right.
if, for instance, a home wanted to put the edge of their home 5 feet into a 7.5
Yes.
setback, that
Yes.
requires a variance. So it's.
right, so
which-
that goes to the Board of Adjustment and Appeal?
Correct.
Yes.
So it's just the combination of lots and size that comes to us?
The greater than 60 feet, right.
Yes.
Because I still don't want to be in the business of reviewing single-family homes. I really don't. Up here, I'm saying, I
I
really
wouldn't
don't.
anticipate that you would.
I mean, to me, I just think it should go to the Board of Adjustment and Appeal. I think it should all go to the same place if there is an appeal process. I don't want to stand here and have to evaluate a single-family home. I just don't. But I guess we'll see, you know. Did you,
So we.
was there a reason you made it different?
I think the idea was to make that a more visible process, so there could be some public input. Not that you wouldn't get that through the Board of Adjustment and Appeal, but I think it was just having that opportunity to work with the Architecture Review Committee first and kind of work through that back and forth.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
Just in talking to the city attorney, the dimensional issues go to the Board of Adjustment and Appeal. We're considering over 60 feet a design issue, and so and design issues come to the city commission. So that's a differentiation between those.
Okay. Okay. So from the last meeting to this meeting, we've all the things that were either discussed here and some of the things that were brought forward that was causing confusion. I feel like some substantial explanation now has been put in there. I feel a lot better about it. I don't have any other questions at this point. I have dialogue I want to have, but I don't have questions. So I'll wait. Okay. Now's the time for folks to come forward and speak to this item. We'll open up the public hearing. I will call forward Hillary Giannis. Individual speaker, Rebecca. Hi.
Hillary Jonas, 159 Bell Trees. I guess probably what my biggest concern here is that I don't know if it's that I don't understand the overlay or if you all don't understand the overlay. As far as I understand it, an overlay is something that should be, 50 to 100 homes, not 1,000. So that's always kind of been my first biggest problem with this. Now that I've kind of dug into the neighborhoods a little bit more, if you're familiar with, I personally live in the Belle Terre, I guess that's how you say it, area, over by Fenway on the Bay, which you're familiar with. And as you know, over there, it's kind of a mix of a bunch of different architectural styles, right? There's not really a rhyme or reason to how the houses are over there. But then as you go up towards, Dunedin Heights on Scotland, there's more of the craftsmen and the coastal vernaculars and that sort of thing. And then as you go down towards like Dexter Park, you get more of the ranch style homes. And it seems like what you've done here in grouping all of these neighborhoods and these 6 styles is now what we're saying. So for someone in my neighborhood or your neighborhood to choose one of the 6 styles, it's not as bad because there's a bunch of different types of houses. But now we're saying, or so it seems, that the house on Albert that everybody has a problem with, if I put some sliders in the front or some casement windows, I can knock down a house on Scotland and build that house. And I don't think anybody wants to see that happen. There's nothing to stop me from doing it. It's part of the 6. It meets a criteria in each one of the 3 buckets. Or I could put a mid-century ranch in there. I could take down one of those houses, and if that's what I decide to build, that's what I could build. So it would seem that when you do an overlay, and it applies to 50 or 100 houses, that would make sense for the Dunedin Heights area. That would make sense for the Dexter Park area. That would make sense for the Victoria Park area. But instead, you guys have now let everybody do whatever they want. And so maybe I don't understand it, but what really concerns me is if you all don't understand it. Because if you don't, then we have a real serious problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and City Hall, what's going on over there? Is that everything in line to look like a big gymnasium? Because that's what it looks
Guys,
like.
please, we're not going to do the clapping. Remember last time?
And I know we have a lot to get through tonight, so we need to keep the comments
Yeah.
on topic to this agenda
Yeah.
item. The time for comments
Guys,
on
please.
general city businesses at the beginning, audience to be heard.
Right. Okay. Next is Deborah Bushnell.
Deborah Bushnell, 645 Loudon Avenue. I am incredibly impressed with the commission and the city staff for even tackling this issue. It's, as you know, it's incredibly challenging. There's a lot of pushback. There are a lot of people with different opinions. It seems like every week I read in the newspaper about a city that has turned its eyes, averted its gaze, and they have huge apartment buildings next to tiny bungalow houses. And it destroys the nature of the community. And you all have taken steps to make that not happen here. You've done what you can do. You've taken the first step. I would encourage you not to water it down, which I think you have not. And I respect you greatly for that. I hope you don't back down. And when you reassess, which I think you should, be sure not to lose your nerve. Be sure to maintain the standards that we need.
Thank you, Deborah. Tracy Love Tipton? You don't want to talk? Okay.
Well, I'll say it. I'll say a little bit. Okay. So you guys know I don't like talking in front of people, but and especially in this case because I can see both sides of this. If you would ask me what I want for my area, I'm sorry, I'm Tracy at 224 Albert Street. I live in the South Overlay area. I've got one of the oldest homes, which is a historic home built by Mayor Walter Bull in 1903. So I appreciate what you guys are doing. I appreciate the consultants and all of the thought that's gone into this. My primary concern is taking away people's rights and having this look more like an HOA. And as you guys know, the character of the city of Dunedin is not in the architecture. I mean, that it plays a very small part of it. It's in the people that are attracted to this community. And in general, people that are attracted, well, I'm not going to generalize, but I fear that it may change the type of people that are attracted to our community. Right now, we have a whole diversity of people, everything from artists, the creativity, the eccentricity, the quirkiness, the oranges on the building and the dogs painted on the, there's so much that goes into our community that comes from the people that live here, and I just don't want that to change. And I feel like having something that appears to be like an HOA, which this does, could affect that. I do have a question that you guys can maybe talk about the sliding scale that might have been in old documentation regarding the height of the building. It was going to be, the angle was going to be less in larger lots. I don't understand why that would be. And also the base height that they touched on, I don't understand if that's at the base flood level or the base level of the first level of the home, which could be quite different. Lots of homes, I think, that are going to be elevated, like mine is, will be elevated so that there's enough room for parking below, which addresses other issues that we have in the city, and I think that needs to be looked at. I have all kinds of other stuff, but I don't really want to go into it. So I'm just going to say, good job. I think that hopefully everybody's keeping an open mind still about this and is taking everybody's concerns into account.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, Alan Wilcox. Nice to see you, Alan.
Nice to see you, too. It's been a while since I've been up here and droned on.
Yeah.
Alan Wilcox, 285 President Street. I've been here about 15 years. I appreciate the intent of the ordinance. I think it's made for people like me. My house is a single-story 1955 ranch. And on paper, I think it looks great. However, where it falls apart for me is in reality. So what I did was I walked around the parts of the proposed district that I don't usually see on a daily or weekly basis and went and looked at some of the houses, and I said, which of these houses could not have been built if this ordinance had been in place at the time? And there's some really cool houses that we wouldn't have today if an ordinance like this were in place. The one that Commissioner Torringa showed that's on Albert, which is ultra modern but is super cool. I love it. There's a couple of big houses on Scotland. I think one's at Orange and one's at New York that are very large but are, again, very good looking in my opinion. There's a couple near the intersection of Beltrees and Broadway. One's been there for several years on the corner. Another one's just wrapping up that I don't think you could build because the envelope, well, they won't fit in the envelope. And there's one on Garden Circle South where the garage is in front of the house, but it looks very nice. It's like a farmhouse style. There's one where they put an addition with on Garden Circle North where they have a garage. You can come in off Beltrees. I don't think any of those houses, you could have built any of those if this ordinance had been in place. And those are all really cool houses. So I would like, before you pass this, and I don't know if some of you have done this individually, to have your staff make a list of houses that exist in this area that could not be built today if the ordinance was in place, and go look at them. Don't look at them on Google Maps or pictures. Go look at them. And I have a feeling, since you're all city officials and have probably been in these neighborhoods, you would be like, oh, this address is that house? I love that house. You're telling me I couldn't let somebody build that house? I have a problem with that. I think you would see some of the unique characteristics of that neighborhood would not exist if you pass this ordinance. It's not 1960 or 70. This neighborhood, which, as the first speaker said, is not really the same neighborhood. It's kind of a mix of neighborhoods. It's not going to look like it did for the first 30 or 40 years it was platted out after the orange groves were all cut down and the Fenway was built and things like that. It's not going to look like that anymore. The last point I want to make is that I realize that you make decisions for the whole city, but in this case, this is just for a specific area. If it was up to me and only me, and I ask you to do this, let the residents of that district have a referendum on it rather than, no offense, you deciding this. I think it would be better if the residents decided this, just like it would be for any other area. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, Amy Hoover?
She got 10 minutes.
Hmm?
She got 10 minutes.
She's got 10 minutes.
Sorry, I apologize.
Did you get the clock? What the? 10 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Amy Huber, 536 Scotland Street. You as the commission just adopted Ordinance 2207, which identifies the criteria that must be met in order to adopt an overlay district. This overlay that you're looking to consider adopting fails to meet the mandated requirements of that ordinance. The first required criteria is that it must consist of 25 compact and contiguous parcels and shall not create any enclaves or pockets within the area. So this is the area that you've identified. 1,400 properties is not compact. It's more than 50 times the 25 parcels that you laid out as a criteria. They are not contiguous, and they do create enclaves. So all of the properties here on this map are properties that you have to gray out because they're not included in the overlay, and these criteria do not. So you have this little property here all by itself, these properties all by themselves, you have these other pockets all by themselves. And so the overlay that you're intending to create is not compact, it's not contiguous, and it does create enclaves. Moreover, your staff report does not provide an analysis of these 4 criteria or how it meets it. So the second criteria says that 51% or greater of the land, the acreage of this area in the overlay, has to be zoned single-family residential, multifamily 7.5, or multifamily 15. There's not a single document in your backup or your records that identifies how many properties total. We've just heard numbers here or there referencing 1,400 properties. We don't have an identification related to acreage or a breakdown. Therefore, it's impossible for you as the commission or anyone else in the audience to understand and identify whether or not you meet this criteria for this overlay. The third mandated criteria is that each boundary of the area has to have one of the following identifiable landmarks: a roadway, alley, railroad track, publicly owned right-of-way, platted subdivision boundary, or a body of water. Again, once you start to carve out all of the properties, this overlay does not meet the mandated criteria. The last criteria is area boundaries cannot overlap with the boundary of the existing historic preservation overlay or an existing character overlay. This overlay that you're attempting to create does conflict with historic preservation properties as well as the Douglas corridor overlay. Therefore, you cannot adopt this overlay district because you don't meet your own criteria as required by your code and the ordinance you just adopted. When you talk about the additional criteria, you have to meet one of those 5. Again, there's no analysis of the staff report to determine which of the 5 this character overlay meets. So it says a distinct architectural character present in the defined area. Well, we know there isn't one distinct because the staff report identifies that there isn't one, so we're going to introduce a few other different ones that don't currently exist. So we don't meet that criteria. Natural or unique landscape features such as water feature, public art, natural forest, well, all of those have been carved out by only including the multifamily and single-family properties. Same with a unique plan for its design, doesn't exist. Other cultural features such as gathering places, parks, cemeteries, doesn't exist. A distinct arrangement of structures that are consistent in massing or height doesn't exist because we don't have a consistency in massing or height. These are all very different, very unique neighborhoods that are now trying to be lumped together. So I'm not quite sure how this overlay came to be, and what you keep hearing from people over and over and over in this area is that these neighborhoods are different, and each of them should have had their own overlay with their own unique design characteristic, and then they actually might meet the criteria that you just set out to create. We thoroughly appreciate the time that you all took at the last commission meeting, and then the inordinate amount of time that your staff took to work through some of the issues and questions that we all had related to the first draft of the ordinance. There does still appear to be some conflict inherently that's somewhat irreconcilable between the definition of development and redevelopment. So the definition of development deals with structural alterations or enlargements of any structure, which conflicts with the 50% that you're including in the redevelopment. And the definition of redevelopment gets tucked into development. And so there needs to be some clarification that if it's less than 50%, it doesn't get dragged through into this ordinance. The other thing that I think is important to pay attention to is when you're talking about the 50% rule related to FEMA is really where it comes into play. You can have a completely interior renovation, especially now with the cost and inflation of cost of building supplies. You can have a complete interior renovation that would exceed 50%. And under the way that this is drafted, that would now require you to bring in new architectural features. Well, what if your existing house is not one of the 6? So now we've created kind of this conundrum that I don't think anyone intended. And so I do think, although it's important that we've started to kind of get down a path of defining what's in and what's out. I still don't think it's clear enough, and I still think that there's a lot out there that needs to be thought through and worked through. We've talked a lot about floodplain, design, build, elevation, and I know that this is extremely complicated, which is why they have 1 million floodplain administrators, 47,000 conferences a year, and a lot of people still get confused. What I do think is important is, although we understand the intent behind the prohibition related to bringing in fill, I don't think people fully understand what that means if it's a strict prohibition. And as currently drafted under the building design section, prohibiting fill completely is going to create a problem. And so if you're in AE, which is the majority of those homes on Bayshore, most of those are currently the grade that they sit at now is 4 feet. So if you've looked at some of the new homes that have been built right there along Bayshore, you see that they have filled part of that to give kind of this slope up. Because otherwise, what's going to happen is if you can't bring any fill in, you're going to have houses that sit 7 and 8 feet above, which is now going to require stairs. Well, I don't know about a lot of you, but my parents are elderly. My dad just had his knee replaced. And going up and down 8 to 10 stairs, because that would be what would be required under that situation, is problematic. Same with if you have a pool or other things, you're going to be going up and down. And I don't think that that's what you all intended with this, but that's going to be the net effect and the result. It's one thing to talk about what you want under the structure of the home. It's another to say we're prohibiting fill at all. And I think that that's extremely problematic. And the aesthetic effect of that is also, there is no way that is compatible or consistent, because you're going to have all of these beautiful, beautiful houses that have amazing landscape. You're going to have them all on stilts. And that's not what that neighborhood should look like, or I think we should encourage other people to look like. We've also talked a lot about process and what the process should be and how the process should work. And it talks about what will happen in the event of when you can and can't go to the Architectural Review Committee. And so we keep talking about this advisory board, and you can go and you can, but what it says here is you only get to go to them under 3 circumstances. 1, you have something unique about your property, which is usually when we get into, variances and hardship, you can show that you can't meet a criteria because of the uniqueness of your lot. Some other technical limitation, or you disagree with the final determination. So we've talked about, well, you can go and get their opinion and talk to them. That's not the way this is drafted, and it doesn't appear that that's something that anything that I've reviewed under Section 104 of your code, which talks about procedures globally, as well as the drafting in this ordinance. Well, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey Falk.
Jeffrey Falk, 236 Grove Circle South. I was asked by a lot of my friends and neighbors who reside in the south side overlay area to speak, so I'm just going to say a few brief words in support of the overlay project. I think you guys have done a great job vetting this. I've been to 4 of the meetings, seen others on Zoom. I've looked at what the opposition has said about this. A lot of what they try to drive is, in my opinion, is fear and misrepresentation. They put up a banner right by the Fenway that says that if this passes, if you want to do an addition onto your house, it will cost $400,000 in addition. Not that it might or that it may, that it will. If you go to some of the websites that are in opposition to this, there's so much fear on there and so much misrepresentation that you guys have addressed and continue to address, and you listen to what everyone says. I think you've done a great job. You know, to me, it's about mass and scale. You know, you're not saying you can't build a big house, but you may need to buy 2 lots if you want to do that. And, you know, there's things that I believe are better for Dunedin, you know, by adopting this. Once again, it's about mass scale. If you want to build a big house, put it on an appropriate sized lot. That's pretty much what I get out of this for the most part. You know, neighbors have rights too, I think it was said at a previous meeting, and I think that's very true. You know, I don't want to impede on your rights, but don't impede on mine. Once again, I applaud all that you've done, and I hope that you pass this tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Donna Sees?
Hello, I'm Donna Cease, 236 Garden Circle North. I just want to echo what Jeff just said. We have attended most of the meetings. Our household has gone back and forth in favor, not sure if we're in favor. And then after some of the presentation by staff tonight, my husband said to me, okay, I changed my mind again. So we're in support of the overlay. We think it's a good thing. It's a step in the right direction, and we hope you will pass it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Libby Heath?
I'm Libby Heath on Grove Circle South. The trajectory of the sun does not acknowledge daylight plane rules. If your house faces west, the sun rises in your backyard and sets in the front yard, regardless of how high the house on either side of you is. If your house faces south, then a neighbor's one-story house or even a 6-foot property line fence will cast a shadow for the first 6 hours of daylight. So logically then, only houses facing north and south should be subject to the daylight plane rule, where they can either be completely subterranean or either have such wide side setbacks that then there's no encroachment by shadow. And of course, I offer that as an absurd solution because it is just that. And it amplifies what I believe is the ridiculous intent to use the daylight plane rule to subvert what can be built. The current R60 zoning regulations precisely define where a single-family house can be built on a lot and specifies maximum dimensions. The daylight plane rule feels to me like a heavy-handed attempt to subvert the zoning regulations without due process. There's not a single family on my street with school-aged children. And you ask why? Well, because the family of 2022 has greater needs and expectations of the family of 1952. By adding the daylight plane requirements, a second story, practically speaking, is impossible to build. You're effectively saying, we don't want families here. And I don't think that's what the community believes at all. That wouldn't most people agree that a healthy neighborhood is multi-generational. But in all of this, to me, the bigger issue is this feels like a breach of the democratic process. That it seems only right that this decision, which affects only the people in Dunedin South, should be made by the people of Dunedin South. And I would urge you to let the democratic process work its magic. Let's bring this to a referendum, and then a peaceful majority rule will solve this once and for all. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Bill Valentine? Rebecca, he gets 10 minutes.
Hi. My name is Bill Valentine. I live at 210 Garden Circle North. I run a technology company in Largo with about 100 employees, and 8 of them live in Dunedin. So we're enjoying it here. I don't know if you remember Deborah. About 3 years ago we moved here. We got invited to dinner with Steve and Lorraine. Had a good time getting to know you. Enjoyed that a lot. I spent most of my career, though, as a design engineer, heading up product development. When you do that, it's really critical to be successful to really capture the customer needs. And it's also critical to review that all the time. It happened a lot in my career. You go down a path, you have the right idea, you forget to go back, you end up with kind of the marketing team says, I can't sell this anymore, right? So anyway, I tell you that because I wasn't really paying much attention to this, but a lot of our neighbors are really concerned. I love our neighbors, so I thought, let me look into this. And I approached it as product development. I went back and read everything, and as you pointed out earlier, this whole thing was based on a Dunedin 2017 vision update and a citizen survey from 2019. So I looked at that. I was kind of baffled, actually, because there wasn't actually a vision update link. It didn't work, but there was a summary called You Spoke, We Listened. It categorized a bunch of concerns and talked about development, and there was a common concern with overdevelopment, but it was really geared towards downtown. It was really about this threat to this perceived village-like ambience, it said. Really was clearly about downtown. So I read the citizen survey, and it concluded the top priorities of the city should be how well the planning is in for the future, traffic, care, environmental sustainability, public works, emergency services, overall aesthetics of the city, city parks and recreation utilities, and availability of affordable housing. So I still didn't see this demand for our South Side district. There was a bunch of word clouds, they called them. What they called them? Word clouds. And you're supposed to, the major concerns are bigger, right? And I saw lots of words around traffic, safety, trail, downtown, city growth, downtown. So these surveys were really focused on downtown. So I got off on the wrong foot. So I'm trying to understand what the goal here is. And the surveys you reference just don't talk about residential. People that come here, they care about water access. They want to see the city. They don't go, geez, I come to Dunedin to walk the Garden Circle North, and I hate what they've done to those houses. And so I'm just confused. So my first point was I don't really understand the what's driving this. It kind of seems manipulated. So anyway, let's just say that somewhere in there, I missed it, there's a mandate to improve our neighborhood. So the objectives that were also mentioned earlier today, 2 of them that really were the most important, to encourage rehabilitation and reuse as opposed to demolition, and to protect significant architectural and historical merit and a distinct character. So those are objectives. I don't feel like the solution encourages that. I think it kind of does the opposite. The 2 of the architectural styles don't exist in our neighborhood, so I don't know how we're preserving. And the 6 would require somebody like me to tear down my house because it doesn't meet the 6. So, flexible tool sounds good, but to me, it's a scary tool because you all might win the lottery. Then I got to go to the new architectural committee who didn't buy into all this and says, we have 6 things. You have a bungalow. You don't have one of these 6, right? So I'm a little worried about the vagueness. We remodeled our house, so I'm good. I don't really care now. But even the building guidelines took our Dunedin architect three goes, right? Kept costing me money. I finally go there and say, look, let's sit down. We can't keep paying this guy to keep redesigning what you told him, right? So I don't know what it would take for this new one. But also, I think both our houses, we added on. The add-on complements the old historic part, but it doesn't match it. It's not a style. I'm assuming I would have had to take my house and make it into maybe a Craftsman would have been the easiest one, but I couldn't do what I did. People like the house, but it doesn't match like your house, but it doesn't really have a consistent front and back. And this whole project, like everybody says, appreciate the work. Design engineering's hard. My dad always said a horse was a I mean, a camel is a horse designed by committee. You get all this input. I want a horse, I got a camel now. So it's not easy, right? But it feels a little insincere when, you know, you're trying to protect our neighborhood, can't tear down these historic structures, but we tear down City Hall and build something that's not quaint. I don't mind, I'm into different architecture, but, you know, we tear down a building, you don't reuse it, and then you tell us you have to, you know, do these 6 styles. We want to keep it quaint. So there's other negative impacts. I think Libby mentioned families. We only have one young family on our street, and they're saying they have to move because, one, they haven't been able to expand their little 900 square foot house because there's a moratorium, and they want a modern. So there's a couple on Douglas they like. So they'll probably move, right? So there are impacts to these things. And let's see. So I guess that's it. I mean, reading through the document, I was just confused. I don't feel like we had a mandate. I feel like there's a lot of things we should be focusing on. I think our neighborhood's done excellent. People come there because of its diversity. So we came there. We were in one of the most successful planned communities in America. It was studied for years. It's 4 years old. Raised our kids there. We didn't want to go back. It was great for that. We chose this community because it's diverse. It's interesting. And I don't want to drive it to something else. So that's our concern. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I'll leave 3 minutes.
Thank you. Okay, I can't read that. Oh, Gwen Campbell.
I only have Gwen Campbell, 318 President Street. I only have a couple things to say really quick. Is one, I feel that you gave our part of the neighborhood south of downtown plenty of opportunity as a referendum to give our input. We had public meetings. We had plenty of opportunity to give you input that you've taken into account. You've made appropriate changes. I thank you for that. If we wanted to preserve our home without having an overlay, you know, we'd have to go under the really strict guidelines of maybe a historic designation for our home. I would rather have a community that gets input and the majority speaks about wanting to maintain our community, not just a house, not just a design, but to maintain the community. And I think we've got flexibility here. I think we've had input. I think you've listened. I thank you for that. And I think the community is better for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, David Geddes, 3 minutes.
Hi, good evening again. David Ballard Geddes Jr. I live on Georgia Avenue in Palm Harbor. Throughout the presentation, I did hear words like stakeholding, redevelopment, underlying development rights, underpinning variances, vernaculars, and daylight provisioning, which calls into question, where are we being kept in the dark on this issue, focusing on our rooftops while distracting us from what's going on underneath the ground in regards to our outdated sewer system, our disenfranchised water pipes, which are 70 years old.
I know you're not talking about Dunedin when you say that, David.
Throughout
No.
the nation entirely, our infrastructure,
Nationally, maybe, yes.
uniformly so, has been in a state of decay for decades. And I do call that into question. I feel this is phase one to a comprehensive undertaking to civilian property rights. And I feel as though we're only being given a phase one or just a partial truth to what's taking place in the community. And thank you again.
Thank you, David. Richard, I'm struggling with this one. Parlapi. something, something, something. Sorry. It's a cross between my own vision and handwriting, and it's mostly my own vision. Sorry.
Mike Parlapiano, 252 Garden Circle North. I'm going to keep harping on the same point, and that point is enforcement. You made a statement about this Architectural Review Committee. This is your document. It's dated 4/21/22. I received 11:45 a.m. The Architectural Review Committee only is getting involved with 5 residential units or 6,000 square feet of non-residential space. So how does the Architectural Review Committee affect the R6 zone? It's exempt. It's in your document. It's exempt.
Yeah, but that will all be updated if this gets passed, so you don't have to worry about that.
Why are you putting out today that information? Because I'm hearing this Architectural Review Committee for the last 3 or 4 months, and it specifically states, and it's never been updated. This started in October. This is from the October 1st meeting when I brought this question up. What is the committee? The second thing that's in here is code compliance. There's 3 positions in the city for code compliance. 2 of these positions are currently open. That's as of October 28th. Are those 2 positions still open?
One's open.
We're not going to go back and forth. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done it to begin with. Go ahead.
Okay. We have a
What you've got to
craftsman.
do is speak to this ordinance here.
Okay. Craftsman 3 is our home. If you go into your handout, you have a home-style French Creole 2. And the reason I'm addressing this is you brought up, Mr. Tornga, the concept of stilts. 10-foot, 11-foot stilts because of the floodplain. This French Creole 2, identical to this, 2 stories high with a small parapet on the top, is next door. It's on 10-foot stilts. So in terms of height, this building is high. And we don't see the sun until about 11 o'clock in the morning. It's on not a 6,000 square foot, it's on a 3,000 square foot lot. The 2 setbacks, front and rear, don't comply. And in order to put the sewer line in, because they could not reach the street, they put a T into the next door sewer line, and the code officer must have approved that. When the sewer started backing up 3 or 4 months after the construction, it's been an ongoing problem, and now they have to tear that up. Now, it's been going on for 4 or 5 years. So what I'm saying is, this is all about trust. We're hearing about daylight and sunlight and all this other stuff, and all these exceptions have been made along the way. And our fear is that there will be exceptions made to this plan, as good or as bad as it is. I'm not even making a judgment on that, because frankly, I don't think it's as good as I would like to see it. But that's going to be an issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. John Shine. 10 minutes.
John Shine, 217 Aberdeen Street. I'm going to start with some basic housekeeping, and I'm going to repeat what Amy said. There's been a lot of reference to 2207 being a form or a tool, but it's an ordinance. It's a law, right? And you just passed it. From what I understand, it's a law. So how do you go and pass a second law an hour later that violates your own law that you just passed? And I'm not going to go over all the criteria that Amy went through, but every one of those criteria, 1 through 5 and the additional 1 through 5, this overlay is in violation of it. So you passed a law, an hour later, you're passing a new one that violates the law you just put in place. I don't know. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. Secondly, there are a number of images in this current 2208, pictorial images, that I don't believe the city actually owns. I believe they were procured through Google Images. I believe they were also pictures of people's homes. I don't believe, unless I'm wrong, you have the permission to use those images. And those images are material to understanding this ordinance. And what I've seen them do is use those pictures in reference to how they're going to enforce this law. So if those pictures are not right, somebody messed up. I want you to know that I looked at the oldest 20 houses in all of Dunedin. Not one of them could be replaced based on character overlay. Now, many of them are not in the overlay, but not one of them could be replaced. So how are these architectures so cohesive and so compliant with what we have? I don't get that. Drive down Edgewater. Just drive down Edgewater. Now let's define the word Edgewater, okay? It's right on the water. Hurricane's going to hit them first. The water's going to hit them first, right? So we get a big hurricane. Those are the houses that are going to get hit first. Sorry, Deborah. We'll evacuate you, but those are the houses that are going to hit first. The vast majority of those houses cannot be replaced by character if character overlay is in place. The vast majority of those houses do not currently comply with the architectural standards associated with that. What are you doing? Let's move on. I sent you a report, and it was more of a picture book of every home that has been built from 2017 forward. I wanted you to see the homes that have been built. I wanted you to also see what they replaced, okay? And sometimes I don't sleep well, so I'm up at night looking at this stuff. And I didn't send it to anybody else. I put a lot of stuff on social networking, but I didn't send it to anybody else. Because as I looked at house after house after house, and I saw what was there, and I saw what became, I also had to do a lot of research. It was a lot harder than I thought. And what I realized is that these homes were not builder homes where some guy just bought it, slapped in a new one. These were homes that had been bought and held and loved and lived in for years and years. So when I couldn't find a picture because it wasn't in the MLS, because it hadn't been sold or transacted in 10 or 15 or 20 years, it's because someone lived there for 20 or 30 years, raised their family, loved their family, and every day they went to work, they dreamed of a new home. Every day they thought of their family. Every day they made a sacrifice. And every day they thought, someday, this is going to be my dream. This is going to be my dream home. You can go back and look at the report. You can see the befores. There aren't that many befores, and believe me, if I could find them, I would find them. I'm good. You know I'm good. You know I wouldn't miss out. What I realized as I was working on that report that night was, and the reason I didn't share with anybody but you six, and I apologize, but I'm going to tell you why, was I realized that I had become a passenger in each and every one of their journeys to build their dream homes. I had become part of their journey, part of their dreams. When I went back and I saw their old house, or I saw their lot, or I saw the fact that they lived there for 30 years and worked and now have a new home, I had to live through that data. But that data really was a revelation of a journey to fulfill a dream. You know, oftentimes we think, what's step one to build a house? Well, I got to go get an architect. No, step one to build a house in my neighborhood, step one to build a house in any way, shape, or form, is to have a dream, to have a hope, to make sacrifices, and to go out and build that dream home of yours. That's step one. And I would never be in a situation where I'd say, listen, your dream home, the thing that you've sacrificed your entire life for, the things you worked 30 years for, I don't like it. You got to follow the rules. You got to follow the architectural rules. Too bad. I don't care if that house has been on Edgewater and the flood knocked it over, or that house has been there for 100 years. Dutch Colonial. There are 4 Dutch Colonials I know because I travel my own neighborhood. Gorgeous Dutch Colonials. Can you build a Dutch Colonial? No. Would you ever think of a Dutch Colonial? No. I can tell you there's more Dutch Colonials than there are probably, I won't say it, one of the architectural choices. So each and every one of these new homes is not the result of a builder or an architect. It's the result of a dream. And each home is the embodiment of that family's hope and that family's sacrifices. Please don't take my neighbor's dreams away. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Megan Doherty?
Good evening. My name's Megan Doherty. I'm from 227 Broadway in Dunedin, and I grew up in Dunedin, was born, lived off of County Road 1. Of my 47 years, 25 of those have been in Dunedin. I've watched Dunedin change and grow, and I believe that I shared at the last meeting, and the following hot Friday night, I watched the other 3 hours. And at the end of it, I just wanted to email you all and say thank you. I felt heard. I feel like what you all said at the end, closing comments, were about protecting and preserving Dunedin. And, my dream is to live in my house and not be surrounded by trucks and whatever. I'm not sure what I was going to say here tonight. I just want to say that I believe that it's progress and not perfection, and that the character overlay is progress in the right direction, and that being a part of a neighborhood that I want to live in and stay in has the overlay protections. Because the other side of this is just carrying it through this way, which is, let's say I just start renting my place out and I just do 3-month rentals. Then slowly that neighborhood becomes much more transient. And I just go someplace else. Then somebody else who came in and built their $1 million home is upset about the transient part of the neighborhood. The other side of it is you've got a couple people here, and I'm not calling anybody out, but you've got a couple people here that own lots of properties or some properties that they want to develop. It's not the people here that are making an average salary with a house, okay? It is, and then they are going out and they are getting people to lobby for them so it looks much bigger. If I took an email address and a phone number and a actual address of all the neighbors who drove by me and were appalled by what they see next door to me and 2 doors down by me, I would be able to do that. I could have done that, but I believe that I don't have to do that. I believe that you're going in the right direction with this character overlay. But there is a large community support for this character overlay and keeping Dunedin quaint. An overlay is not out of nowhere. A lot of communities do overlays. And protecting the quaintness, the coolness of Dunedin, that's what I believe this overlay is about, and we can't get lost in perfection, and we can go for progress. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Megan. Okay. Ryan Sanders. Saunders, sorry.
Brian Saunders, 250 Lyndhurst Streets. I want to approach one topic first in the sense that the scale of the overlay and where it sits. I feel it takes away that option of neighborhoods to actually decide, is the overlay right for them? It's being forced on us on the south side, even though we have had mention of many different neighborhoods that make up the south side of Dunedin that are all different, all have their own characters. all have their own representation of homes there that may not want those different styles of homes in their neighborhood, but they lose that right under this new overlay. But that's not really what I really wanted to focus on. I wanted to focus on what changed in the past 2 weeks was related to the redevelopment being defined as 50% of that fair market value of the structure. And I recently went through a home development, so I do have a grasp on what that 50% rule is, because I was in a floodplain, and I recognize what you have to go through for that. And I think it's very clear that we need to educate residents on what it is. It's the structure. It's not the value of the property, of that home, that assessed value. It's the value of the structure that we need to focus on. And it's really easy to hit that 50% rule let's say you've got a 900 square foot home. Your dream is to grow that home, develop that home, and build the home of your dreams. And it's really easy, I would say, to hit that if you're adding a roof, you're adding a porch, you're doing hurricane windows, you're going to hit that quickly. So I get concerned that this has always been communicated, we're going to stop big mansions. And I don't know that it's been adequately communicated now that this language is in here. It is going to impact what we call substantial renovation, 50% of the value of the home. And I think it disproportionately impacts those of lesser means of lower homes. We know somebody could go and do different workarounds for this. They could hire their own property appraiser, get their own appraised value of the home. They could go through and look for, maybe they delay and stagger the builds. That's not what somebody needs to do when they need to move in quickly because they just bought the home for the family. They need to upgrade that home, build that home out to their needs. And I just don't think it's been adequately communicated. This is more than just stopping the big mansions. I know that the commission here is stuck. You don't have a choice. But I've heard many of you say, and I know, Jeff, you said this specifically, we need to reevaluate this in a year. We need to rethink about it. You're stuck now because you have a moratorium on building. Nothing can be built right now. But there is nothing that has been committed to that there will be reevaluation in a year. And this goes into law. We miss that opportunity. I would say stay strong with that. Put in, we will really reevaluate this. We will make sure it's working for more than just the McMansion stopping, but also those that are redeveloping their homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Marco? Hi.
My name's Tom Marco at 525 Norfolk. First, I would just like to address one of the comments that was made tonight. I'm put up by no one. I am my own person, and many of these people are their own people as well. There's no cabal here where there's some fictitious single individual who's the only one that's opposed. In truth, if we really want to find out how many people are opposed, for, and against, maybe there should be an open vote through the residents, a well-informed open vote, so that all the residents would be knowingly and understand what this all involves. That's, to me, the democratic way. When you're going to do something that is going to impact so many people in so many ways, they deserve to be well-informed and know. Now, I know we can say we've had some meetings and so forth, but there's a little ambiguity that went around with that, especially at the beginning, when most of us didn't even know what was going on. I never received, and none of my neighbors that I ever asked received the first questionnaire, supposedly, that happened. I'm sure it did, except it seemed to have been very limited. Now, that's completely off of what I really wanted to say, but I will continue at this point. I just wanted to address several points about the ZIP itself, as well as the proposed overlay and its unintended consequences. This morning I received the email at 10:59 from the city of Dunedin, and in an email it laid out several points about the ZIP and the proposed overlay. My first thought was, as I read the 19 points and how they were laid out, about how the city of Dunedin in the first place decided, metaphorically I'm speaking of course, decided to use a wrecking ball on an admitted problem that could have been done in a much fairer way to the property owners to solve a problem. For instance, maybe instead of the onerous ZIP implementation of all South Dunedin, possibly a review process on all new construction with some sort of reasonable compromises could have been made in the meanwhile. yes, I have been a victim for the past almost year, especially since so much of the reasoning for the zip seems to be based around one home on Albert Street, as pointed out as a reason, number 7 in the email. Let me move on. In email point number 1, status of an overlay that does not affect existing homes, base zoning, and does not change. To me, this is a big one, the entitlements. That's simply not true. Of course, it could change a property owner's entitlements, because if you now are telling me that I cannot do something that my home that I could formerly do, of course you are taking away my property rights. Just because you are leaving the original code in place and putting an overlay on it doesn't change anything.
All right, thank you, sir.
I wish I could finish my points because they're important. Thank you.
Thank you. Dale Cox. Dale Cox has 10 minutes.
My. Dale Cox, 647 Broadway, 316 Albert Street, in case you don't recognize me. I stood here about a year ago, along with a whole lot of other people, talking about the assault that Dunedin is undertaking to attack our way of life, our city, our residential area that means so much to a whole lot of people. It took 75 years to create what we're talking about here. And I'm going to cut to the chase, because all the lines, all the diagrams, all the rhetoric about the sun and what's going on with this and with that, most of the people I talk to are concerned about compatibility. Okay? And what I've heard here tonight is about the Architectural Design Review Committee, which is supposed to be your first line of defense on what's going on here. And I don't want to insult anybody. I don't want to critique anybody's ability to make rational decisions. But as I see it, from what I've witnessed over the last couple of years, the Architectural Design Review Committee that's in place has failed you, it's failed me, and it's failed everybody that's in the South Side Historic Residential. I am absolutely appalled that someone who sits back and claims that they are interested and concerned about the welfare, the ambiance, the tranquility, and all the things that it took 75 years to create would make the kind of decisions that would allow a few of the structures that I've seen go up in the historical residential area. We're under assault on two fronts. The first front is people coming in here from New York, yes, California, and they come in here with money, and they want success. And Dunedin, in the historic residential, is one of the most fantastic success stories that you could ever possibly imagine. These people come in here with one thing and one thing only on their mind, and that is to capitalize on your success. And by capitalizing on your success, they put money in their pockets. They are concerned about three people: me, myself, and I. They're not concerned about you, Jeff. They're not concerned about you, Mo. They're not concerned about me or anybody else. They're concerned about themselves and how they can capitalize on Dunedin's success story. The second front that we're being assaulted on is misinformation. I cannot tell you how many people have come up to me and said, how can anybody tell me what kind of front door I should have, or what kind of siding I should have on my house, or what kind of roof I should have, or what kind of pavers I should have in my driveway. This is not what this overlay, as I see it, is about. It's about compatibility. It's about keeping people from coming into this community and blowing a great big gaping hole in a wonderful residential area because they don't care. They're willing to sit back and crush a little 86-year-old woman like a bug that's lived in her house for 70 years. That's what we're trying to sit back and prevent here. All the lines and all the diagrams and all the stuff that it confuses me, and I'm sure that it confuses a lot of people behind me. We're talking about compatibility, avoiding somebody coming in here with mega bucks and buying a small lot and going property line to property line, front to rear, and blowing a big hole in a wonderful neighborhood. And the Architectural Design Review Committee, as I see it in place, is failing us. Failing us in epic proportions. I hear it continually. I'd like to make a suggestion. I don't know if it'll fly. It doesn't make any difference to me whether it does or it doesn't. We've had a lot of people sit back and cause anxiety, cause misinformation, cause division within this community. We are better than looking at a couple of kids arguing over toys in a sandbox. We got a mission here as residents, and you have a mission as city leaders to see to it that we don't lose what's taken 75 plus years to create. Let's not worry about architectural design. Let's not worry about the windows or the doors or the garage. Let's worry about compatibility. The Architectural Design Review Committee should be in the hands of these people, okay? It's already been proven to me, and I don't want to insult anybody, that the Architectural Design Review Committee that's in place has failed us. John Shine has come up here and made some very good points. A lot of them I don't agree with, but a lot of them I do agree with. And if we could take people like this couple back here, right over here, that has brought forth a historic situation for their home, to make sure that their home can sit back and sit proudly within a historic community, that would be the first person or the first couple that I would say I want them to represent me. And all the energy that John Shine has put forth to torpedo what's going on here with this overlay, if he took the energy and focused on working together as part of a community, we would get something solved here. But as I see it, whatever decisions you guys make tonight, moving forward, it's going to be the first of a long series of meetings and some dialogue. We got to work together as a community. We got to work together with the pros and the cons to bring it together to make it work. Because regardless of what you guys do, it's going to be wrong.
Thank you, Dale.
Thanks.
Okay, Justin Visay.
Justin Vesey. And, well, I think we should just end with that. That's, golly, that's pretty tough to follow. So I'm Justin, 467 Bryland Street, Tarpon Springs, Florida. And my clock's going to tick fast. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I'm so impressed with all the residents of Dunedin. I wish we had so many thoughtful and passionate residents in Tarpon Springs, because we're going to get the wave that is coming over you right now. A little background at Tarpon Springs. I've been there for 22 years. I'm actually part of the LPA board there. We call it the Planning and Zoning Commission. So I'm a volunteer board member, and I appreciate how well you all listen. At the same time, I'm kind of a stakeholder in your community, although you're like, why is this guy from Tarpon up here? Is because I do construction work, and I have for about 22 years, and a lot of that's been right here in Dunedin, kind of varied. Some of it a long time back, and some of it real recent. I do design and then self-perform construction residential. I'm the guy that you're all hoping and dreaming when you got a dream to do something on your house, you eventually kind of see a guy like me. Somebody's nodding their head. Well, everybody's got to have a plan. And coincidentally, I'm kind of the test tube baby, because I have a project that was in design. They got slowed down because of the zip, and we had to park it for a bit. And I hope to be the first permitted project that comes out on the other side of this ordinance should you pass it. And it's an accessory dwelling unit. It's not really big, but it's big for the owner. It happens to catch every hook that goes into the process. FEMA, Limwa line, height, daylight planes, I got it all. It's not super easy, but the planning and zoning staff, who I've met with twice, have been wonderful, and it's worked really quickly. And all the documents that are available have made that design process clear and concise. And overall, they were, and I want to use the words that Ms. Bramley said, was that they were there to help me get to the end. In fact, a gentleman who I don't see in the crowd right now, who was the floodplain manager, gave me an ace in the hole. I had a real tough, hard wall to come against within the FEMA guidelines, which, for those that don't understand, you keep tossing out this 50%. That's a set of rules that, frankly, the city has nothing to do with. The 50% construction rules that are challenging aren't set by this board or by ordinance. That's FEMA, and we just all have to live with those. So, yes, my time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Last but not least,
No, I got one more.
it doesn't add any expense to anybody's project, period.
Thank you. Julie Scales.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Commissioner.
Julie Scales, 506 Lockley Street, in the proposed overlaid area. First of all, I just want to thank you a lot for really listening to the citizens. This all started a few years ago, and after being through several of the public meetings that we had, that there were really a number of people that were very concerned about what direction the neighborhood was going to go in. And so they came and asked you about it. I mean, they don't know how to go about that. And I want to commend you for really, making the effort to find out, how that could be done, how that could help the concerned residents there. And I think what you've come up with is a very fair and balanced. I think the city manager used a middle ground approach. It's respecting the legal property rights of all the property owners down there. It's recognizing that maybe we do need some tools to, kind of enact our commitment or follow through on our commitment to compatibility. And I just think that's very good, and I want to thank you very much for that. And I think finding that balance is good. I hate to see, people proposing basically a zero-sum game. I don't think that's the best policy, and I hope you support this and vote to go forward with this project. And you certainly will have opportunities to review it and see what kinks there are and how it's going. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie. Okay. That's all the cards I have. We will come back to the Commission for Dialogue. Sorry. You want to go right into dialogue, or anybody need a break?
Break. We need a break, yeah.
Okay.
I need a break an hour
5
ago, but-
minutes.
I didn't want to
Yeah,
get
that
up when
was
people
not,
were
wasn't
speaking.
going to stop people from, okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. We'll call this meeting back to order. There were a number of things that I heard that I thought need to be addressed before we get into our dialogue.
Mayor, if I can ask staff to come up to the table and fill up as well, if that's okay.
Yes, please. Okay. Pictures?
Oh, the pictures. Most of the pictures, if not all of the pictures in the ordinance, were taken from the Cooper Johnson handbook.
Which we paid for.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. The review part in the year, that's direction we can give you. It's on record. It's on television. It'll be written in the minutes.
Yes. Okay.
So it doesn't have to be added to a law.
It does not.
Okay. The ordinance itself, in regards to us doing this ordinance the way we've done it versus how the ordinance lays it out. The way the ordinance lays it out, isn't that for a citizen-initiated process?
The distinction between the framework and
Yes.
this overlay?
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't see those two as being intertwined. I think what you did with the first ordinance was, again, set...
It was
set
done legislatively, which can be done on any number of things.
And the next overlay
legislatively.
could
We don't
look
have to
into-
follow, that is what the citizen would follow if they want to initiate it. So we are not, to our city attorney, we're not violating our own law, correct?
Ordinance 2207 does not mandate requirements for the South Dunedin Character District. It codifies certain criteria, legislative criteria, as you pointed out, that the City Commission would like to see in considering future citizen-initiated character districts.
Thank you. Okay. Then, I don't know, there was a question on the sliding height. I think that got resolved from previously, did it not? Okay.
And in fact, Mayor, that was from we looked at that at the Hale Center meeting, and because so many residents were confused by it, we decided not to pursue that.
Gotcha. So, done. Okay, there was a question about the fill. When I read what was on there about the fill, that is, I am making an assumption. You just tell me if my assumption is correct. The way it reads is that you cannot use fill to put your property higher than the next guy's. It's not that you can't use fill. It's just you can't use it to make the property higher than the next guy. And that has to do with runoff, correct?
I think that's fair. But obviously, stormwater runoff is a concern.
Right, okay. The Architectural Review Committee description, that's in their, binding, their resolution that describes what they do.
Their enabling resolution.
Yeah, once we do this, if this passes, then that will all get adjusted, correct?
Correct. It will, and Mayor, if I can make a point, if
Yes.
you don't mind,
Please.
about what Mr.
Yeah, because
Dale-
I was going
yeah.
to say something too, but go ahead.
Yeah, about the Architectural Review Committee has failed. Those properties, the Architectural Review Committee did not see.
That's correct.
Because, and
That's
this is one of
correct.
the reasons why we're doing this overlay.
Right.
So.
Because it will fall in their jurisdiction then.
Right, now.
If they don't follow the guidelines and they want to go to the Architectural Review Committee, yes.
So we will adjust the enabling
Yes.
resolution. Okay. All right, I think that's probably the majority of the things that I heard that weren't really correct. Okay, so we're going to come back for our own dialogue. Anybody have any questions that they want to ask before we get into dialogue?
I'll ask just one question, if I may, and I'm really addressing everybody, but I'm going to ask you. The question was, why didn't we do a referendum on this?
Well, that should go to Jennifer or the legal, not to George.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying it goes over here, but I'm looking at you, so. It was asked, people asked the question.
We don't do referendums.
Oh, that's a question for me?
If you like.
Sorry.
Well, it's not for George, that's all I can tell
We didn't do
you.
a referendum because you are not required to do a referendum to make legislative amendments to your land development code.
As a matter of fact, actually, the land development code tells us that we're to be looking at this.
Yeah, well, your comprehensive plan since 1974 has said implement these 9 or 10 criteria that are.
So I'll make a comment about that
Okay,
later, but I just
sorry.
wanted to ask that question
Yeah.
just so it was clear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we've heard what everybody has to say. One of the things that I brought up last time was the consideration of the architecture issue in and of itself. Our folks have told us that they feel like it's an important piece of it. I'm assuming that you all feel the same way.
So part of what I did over the last couple of weeks, just to add to that specific thing, was I reached out to some different architecture people. And well, I'll say two things. I think having the outlet for an alternative style, if somebody really feels passionate about a style that they really want, that they think would be cool in the South Side, they have an outlet for that now, which I appreciate that. I think that's a big change from before. I also think there was a comment made by I'm not even going to try the name, I'm just going to say the consultant, that made me think there's unintended consequences if we don't have that third leg of the stool of architecture. In other words, the comment was made, you can get some pretty funky designs to kind of live up to the daylight plane. And that scared me. I kind of double-checked that with some architect people, and they're like, yeah, that could definitely happen. So I think it is a piece of the stool that I think is important, but I also think it was important that we give an outlet, like we do for our commercial properties. And so that's kind of where I think it's an important piece to keep in.
And I appreciate your consideration. Anybody else want to comment on that?
Is this your R60?
Yeah.
Well, I think that it's based on R60, MF 7.5, and MF 15. And we've seen some of the issues we're trying to address have definitely happened on R60, the lot to lot. So I will agree with my colleague that it is it's the three-legged stool. You kick one out, kick out architecture, you kick out one of the zoning capabilities, then you're really gutting the concept of the overlay. That's how I feel.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and I've seen what the staff had to say, so it's not anything I'm gonna.
Yeah, for me in the architecture, it is only the concern over the funky styles within the daylight plane that really concerns me. Other than that, I'm not concerned about, and so that's why I would want it in there, because in general, that ugly house that gets built, why did somebody build that style of house, actually over time becomes endearing. It's the ugly house in the neighborhood, which then adds to that unique character. We all talk about it. So that didn't concern me. But the funky style that somebody might have to use trying to avoid that daylight plane would concern me.
And I get that point, totally. Totally.
I think your question was about the three-legged stool, so I'll just summarize what everybody, I'm comfortable with having the
Okay.
three-legged stool.
Okay. Then I guess the next thing would be to read the ordinance by title only.
Ordinance number 22-08, an ordinance of the City of Dunedin, Florida, amending the Land Development Code, City of Dunedin, Division 3 Overlay Zoning Districts to establish the South Dunedin Character Overlay, providing for codification, publication, and severability, and providing for an effective date. Mayor and Commissioners, this has been reading of Ordinance 22-08 on second reading by title only.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve?
I will make the motion. How come you didn't read the entire thing? I mean, that could have taken up at least an hour.
Vice Mayor Kynes, is there a second?
I will second.
Okay, and Commissioner Franny. All right, I will go to you, Vice Mayor Kynes, for your final comments.
Yes, I'm going to say again, some people are going to think this is pablum, and some of them are going to think it's hot sauce. It's going to be one or the other. I think we heard some really good comments about there is one thing about Dunedin, and we do work together. We will strongly disagree, but we will come to a point where we will work together, and I believe that. We always have. There's been other issues that have been difficult. I do agree with Jeff. I think it's excellent. You know, next April, you're going to look at it. You're going to see there might be something that is not quite right, and that's okay. That's okay. What you're going to do is you're going to build to the middle, and thereby you're protecting your neighbors from avoiding negative impacts as to light, air, and view. And I think that's very important. I think building across lots is very important. And that was one of our primary things, taking 2, 3 lots and now they have a direct procedure. They go to design review. They go to ARC. We put in exemptions. So if from this smorgasbord, again, Mr. DiMiara, what, is that correct? From this smorgasbord, and if you still have the components that you want to do a little something else, now we are giving you the capability to go to architectures, landscape architectures, interior. I mean, it is a very qualified volunteer board. We've also looked at additions. That was one of the other things. We've looked at people that say, well, you know, the shape of my lot, it may be difficult under some of these technical abilities. We've given them a way to say, okay, I'm going to have some technical issues here, and I need to talk to an expert to guide me to be able to do what I want to do. I think this is the right thing to do. Compatibility, it's not that we just dreamed it up. You know, it's 1974. And we've been trying to do compatibility and somehow bring that compatibility standard to our comprehensive plan to our neighborhoods. Now, whatever the neighborhoods choose, whether they choose to use a tool in the north, you know, that's going to be another 2017, 2019, the process that we went through here, which was a long time. But I believe it is the right thing to do, and I am in support of the overlay to preserve and protect the neighbors and the neighborhood and maintain the unique character of the South Side.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Mayor.
Well,
Commissioner Franny.
I'm going to start, before I make my official comments, to say that I have a 3-story house being built across from me, not in the character overlay. And it's been 2 years in the making, and it's coming to its conclusion. And I kept looking at it, and of course, my mom, who doesn't like any of the big houses, you know, figured she'd never like it. And I kept looking at it, and I'm thinking, like, why is that actually okay? Why does that look good? You know why it looked good? Because they didn't build the house to their full setbacks, on the side setbacks. They actually, and George checked this out for me today, they almost doubled their side backs. They still got plenty of house. They got 3 little kids. They're going to be great neighbors. But they did it voluntarily, which is great, but boy, what a difference it makes. And I think that's what we're looking for. That's what I think that's what every neighbor wants or deserves, you know, that you can respect the property rights, but at the same time, a little breathing space, so you have a room, some room. You know, a few words that I heard, you know, it's progress, not perfection. Step in the right direction, small step to preserve and protect. I look at it and I say, you know, the real question to me is, what do we want to become? You know, not even what we are, not even what we see right now, but what do we want to become? I think, I look at Rob, and you said, you lived in a community where it became something you didn't want it to be. And I've lived in this community 35 years, and no matter what studies or surveys you've done, people always have been passionate about our charm and finding a way to preserve it. And I have always said, and I've been clear, you have to have growth too. It's balance. It's about balance. Balanced growth, trying to stay focused on the charm, but that is always something people have deeply cared about, which is why I'm sure compatibility has been in our comprehensive plan since 1974. We've talked about, that doesn't mean staying the same. I mean, we haven't stayed the same. If you were here 35 years ago, you know that. We had vacancies and a lot of crap, or sorry, there's that word crap again, sorry. A lot of stuff up and down Main Street. And codes have been changed. In 2005, you used to be able to do 8 stories in downtown Dunedin. Now you can do 3 by right. People could have sued us then, but they kind of got it. That wouldn't be us. Dunedin's a really big success story. And part of it is just making the right decisions at the right time, and they're not easy. And I don't know, this is not perfection, but it's a step. It avoids big box houses built to all setback lines, which makes it really hard on neighbors. It provides for design review for multiple lots, frontages over 60 feet. Then it has to go to design, come to us. It has architectural standards for compatibility, and to the point we talked about, avoiding odd designs just to meet the daylight plane. It provides a lot of flexibility now, and some would say, and some people said that, it's too much. I think it provides balance by having the ability to show an alternative design if you feel that passionate about it, that it fits in. It was unanimously recommended by the local planning agency. I believe two of the members who live in the district. One's a huge property rights person. And on this board, I know we have one member that's in the district, city manager's in the district who's recommending it. So it's not like it doesn't touch up here. I think, again, I had down here, some may think or want this to achieve more than it can, so it's not far enough. Others fear it will restrict them much more than it can. Not doing enough, again. Or doing too much, sorry. So again, it's all about balance. I'll just end by saying, I think this is the least intrusive option to try and preserve and protect the rights of all neighbors and residents and the city's treasured charm. So I favor the ordinance, and I absolutely favor diligent following and tracking of the results of it, the good and the bad.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Tronka?
If I may, I would like to say 3 things about this. One are going to be my own words. Whatever she said and whatever she said, I liked a lot. So I'll summarize. I see this actually as a program that we probably all should have just volunteered to do with respect to property rights and the property rights of others. I know that sounds a little harsh and easy to say, but for example, the house you talked about, when people have respect within a community of others that live in the community, we have to get along together, we have to live together. As far as the referendum, I said I would say something about that. Yes, we have a responsibility to look at this, and we're not trying to dictate a set thing that has to go here. I think there's just lots of flexibility in this. And again, this is about compatibility, and this is about our Dunedin. This is our Dunedin, all of our Dunedin. So yes, some of us may not live in that particular area, but as I considered this, I considered it as if I were living in that. And I don't want to do anything that's harmful, but I do want to do something that's respectful to the community. I think this is respectful. I don't want to put a time on when we're going to look at this. I say we look at this whenever we have to look at this, because like someone said, this is a big step, and that's why we've taken the time that we've taken to do this, because we wanted to make sure that everybody was having a say in this, if they wish to have it. And we saw people step up quite late that didn't have a say earlier because for whatever reason they did not know what was happening about it, or it was new to them. And so at least they had the chance to say something about this. I think this is fair. I think this will work. I think this does require staff to keep an eye out, and they've made that full commitment. And I know the rest of us will as well. So I'm going to be supportive of this. And again, it's what that lady over there said and what this lady here said. I like it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Cowell.
Thank you, Mayor. This will be my third commission meeting that I've really, really hated. Anytime, I've had two other votes that impacted residential, and I was miserable during both of them. And I'm terrible with disguising my face, so I'm sure that you guys probably see that I've been uncomfortable all night. I do want to share with you something real quick. I might have mentioned it on Tuesday. I just can't remember anymore. And I mentioned it to a couple people in the chamber tonight. But after the first reading, there was a school teacher at the high school that was teaching a college-level statistics course with her class. And the subject was opposing views, and she happened to see the first reading. And so she asked me to come in and share with the class what the opposing views were and how it came about, et cetera, et cetera. And I did, and it was a wonderful class. Teenagers, half of them were asleep. It was early in the morning. and then the others were, what do I care what my neighbors? I don't, they're on their phones. They don't care what their neighbor's building. But we also got the opportunity to talk about government. And the idea of what they saw really was the best form of government that's closest to the people. And I just want to thank all of you for being such representatives of how democracy should work. I think y'all have been polite, professional, and kind. Everybody spoke their view and got their points across. And so I think thank you for being such models for the students in our schools on how to be good citizens. So thank you all very much. One of my favorite things to do, now on with this. One of my favorite things to do is, when I'm out and about, is to ask people, do they live here, or are you visiting? And for the ones that live here, it's where did you come from and how long have you lived here? And they're never born here. It's always they came from somewhere else, and they've been here a variety of years, 1 year to 20 years, whatever. And so when I ask them where they were from, again, somewhere else, Chicago, New York, Canada, wherever it is. And I always find it odd that how can you live in Chicago? How did you find Dunedin, Florida? Population of 37,000. And it's wonderful to hear their stories because they tell them like it's so unique and they're all really the same, right? That they were down here visiting or they know a friend and they didn't even come to Dunedin. They were in Sarasota, they were in St. Pete, they were in Brooksville, Tampa, wherever they were, and out riding around. They liked the place and they end up, they find Dunedin. And they instantly say, I stopped looking. Right? And the thing about me is I don't know that feeling. I was born here. And so I don't know what it's like to live somewhere else and find somewhere else they need to move to. And I think that now that doesn't mean that I haven't lived other places. I have. I was climbing the corporate ladder and I've moved around. But the moment I had an opportunity to move where I wanted to move, for me, it was back home. It wasn't to a new place. It wasn't trying to find a home somewhere else. It was the opportunity that I had to share where I grew up with my two wonderful, wonderful girls. And I always get emotional. Oh. And it's not
We're a
even,
bunch of criers
it's
up
not
here,
even
sir.
about environment, geez.
Okay, which
Get a plant.
way? Which way?
and I know I'm not alone, that I just absolutely love this community. There isn't anything that I don't really, really love. And I hope it comes out in everything that I do. My very first commission meeting, I had to vote on the hotel on Grant Street. And I was the environmental guy. I was the anti-development guy coming in. At least that was the label that was placed on me. And I got quite the kudos the next day when I voted yes for a hotel downtown on what was considered by the residents a residential street, and I was putting up a hotel. And the reason I voted yes on that was because there was no reason not to. That developer did everything they could to make that hotel as small as they could. And so many times when we talk about our ordinances and we talk about setbacks and we talk about height, everybody builds to the maximum height. So when we say that you got a maximum height of 27 feet, you got a maximum height of 35 feet, that's where people build to like it's a minimum. And that saddens me. It saddens me that when I grew up here, if you wanted to see a really big house or McMansion, my God, you went to Spanish Trails. That was a place to go. You didn't even go down Edgewater because those houses, as big as they were far enough back, it was open space. And so really there was one place you went, along Santa Barbara. All those houses were single-story ranch style. Everybody had a view of the sunset, the Intercoastal Waterway. Baywood Shores, same way. And a lot of them still are, but you can see where it's changing. And I'm happy to hear, Mo, that at least across the street, you have somebody that didn't max out. They had the opportunity, they're allowed to by law, they're allowed to by ordinance, but they didn't. They were considerate. And you can go down Santa Barbara now, and you can just see where there are houses there that just block out the sun. And it just, that's not where I grew up. That's not my community. But I understand that we can't stay stagnant, right? If you're not growing, you're dying. Society is gonna move us in that direction. So the best we can do is try and control it. What can we do? And we do have to balance property rights, and it really is the person that wants to build a dream home versus the person that has already built their dream home. I think that was said at the first reading by somebody. And that really is what we're trying to do. How can we make the best impact with the smallest gesture? And I think this is what we're trying to do. At least that's what I'm trying to do. The last thing I want to do is negatively impact anybody's dream home. The idea of multifamily, right? We have heard all kinds of things about generational, multi-generational, and we need to make room for the different generations coming through who ironically are thinking smaller. All these big McMansions that are being built now, the younger generation isn't going to want them. I don't know how quickly you can turn those over because the younger generation, you're not going to get your money out of it for those investing. And I know that's years down the road, but it is coming. We also have to make room for our first responders, our essential workers. We have out cost in our housing, room for firefighters, room for teachers, room for hospital workers, room for our service workers. Oh, how we love our restaurants, but where are those workers going to live? And so we need to make room for them. Those restaurant workers, whatever they're getting paid, it's not enough, and they can't afford Dunedin, so they're living far away. Either they've got to drive in, or they're riding their bikes, and they love Dunedin, they love where they work, but how many places are they passing? How long is it taking them to get to work to where they're going to end up going, I love Dunedin, I love Casatina's or whatever it is, but I've got a restaurant 2 doors down from me or the 2 blocks down. So we're going to start losing workers. And then what are we going to do? You got teachers again that can't work here. So we need to make room for everybody. We need to make room for multi-generational. We have to make room for different types of housing. I do have a challenge trying to decide why it's acceptable to build a 2-story single-family home, but we don't want a 2-story multifamily home. I know that there are, the south side of Dunedin, and I'm sorry, I'm going on, but this is so passionate to me. South side of Dunedin was built relatively at the same time as those neighbors of the South Sabbath in North Clearwater. And if you go through those neighborhoods, you can actually see duplexes, quadplexes, that fit naturally into the character and the uniqueness of that neighborhood. We can do that here. But what a wonderful opportunity for multifamily to be able to do what you guys do. Walk in from your home in your neighborhood to our downtown for that cup of coffee on Saturday morning. Walk their dogs around the neighborhoods. So I find it interesting that there are some people that don't want multifamily in a neighborhood where it's zoned multifamily, but yet they're pro-property rights. And so I'm a little confused in how that fits into the whole character overlay on who we are as a community, not just a neighborhood. And so I'm a real believer in trying to make room for everybody, and we have to do that. Every decision we make, we have to look through the lens of what's the impact on that 30 years from now, 50 years from now. But again, I am very cautious on any negative impact I am having on property rights. And so I've got lots of concern over this. I've got lots of concern over the 50% rule and with escalating prices, what that really means. And what does that mean for the homeowner? And so I am in support of this tonight only for the reason that we're going to come back and look at this in a year. And I'm very comfortable if it doesn't appear that it's working, that it needs to be removed. But I think as it stands now, I think the way the architecture looks and the small impact, I don't think we're going to have a problem, but it is worth looking at and taking into consideration because you guys need to know you can trust us and that we are comfortable enough. If we're going to think we're going to move forward with this, that we're also honest enough to let you know when we got it wrong and to make that decision as soon and quickly as possible. So that's all that I'll say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I don't know how I follow that. Everybody's said it all. I think after the visioning, there was a gentleman saying that he didn't understand where this came from. Well, part of it was because of the McMansions and building across two lots and giant size house on a street that didn't have houses even half of that size. Part of it was visioning and what we were hearing from those people, and the multifamily popping up in the middle of a neighborhood where you might have 2 or 3 stories right next to a bunch of single-family homes and with no transition. And that's the way it was zoned back in the day when the group that looked at all of this zoning was looking at us to have a downtown like Clearwater with the heights that Clearwater had. That was the original plan. We didn't morph to that. We didn't want to morph to that. And that's why we're going back to try to address it, because we don't want to be like Clearwater or that downtown. We want to be, who we are today. In addition, the townhomes or the multifamily that's been springing up, most of them, a lot of them have been under the 6 units and 5,000 square feet. And so a lot of them don't get the architectural review. And then we get slammed on social media and emails. Who in the hell decided they could build that? Well, our code doesn't say they have to go through architectural review. Those get covered now. It's a lot of different things that we've been hearing consistently over and over and over again from people that they're upset about. And so I would also say that, there was kind of this talk about newer families have newer needs than what was built in the 50s and 40s and 30s and even the 60s. And I get that, but not every neighborhood is for everybody. If you've got a large family, you might go live in Spanish Trails because they have really large houses. If you're, empty nester, I think you guys are empty nesters, right? You bought a smaller home, right? Because that's all you want to deal with and take care of. So you're not probably going to go buy in Spanish Trails, but should Spanish Trails have a tiny little house to make sure that they get retirees? No. That makes no sense. Everybody's going to buy. Now, I also agree that a neighborhood should be eclectic and have an eclectic mix of people. I mean, I'm not trying to say they shouldn't. Of course they should. But you just can't be all things to everyone. I mean, and that's not the way it was developed. And so when they pack a huge, huge house across 2 lots, edge to edge, next to a bunch of half the size houses, it looks out of place. It still might be attractive. I mean, it might be an attractive architecture, but, and when you have borderline historic neighborhoods that you're now undermining, then it's an issue. And so that's what we've been hearing, and we've been hearing it consistently since 2018, I think.
Yeah, probably longer.
Probably longer. But then COVID hit. So you want to know why this thing took so long? There you go. We had a lot of we couldn't have big meetings. We weren't going to try to tackle something like that on Zoom. It wouldn't be fair, to people. People like to come together when it comes to stuff like this. And we had other priorities, no offense, but we did. Big ones. We're trying to keep people from losing their homes and their jobs and shutdowns, and this just didn't, while we kept hearing it, we couldn't address it at that time. So we're addressing it now. Overall, I mean, for me, I'll be honest, I hear what everybody says about the architecture. For me, I would have preferred not to tackle that nut, but I also understand it. It doesn't bother me enough to vote against it. And there was some little picayune things that I might have changed, but again, the concept is, what I'm proud of is that everybody, George, Kimberly Horn, Jennifer, Nikki, and this commission has spent a lot of time listening and trying to adjust to make it more understandable. Still may not agree with it. I do believe that some of the consequences that have been put out there have been, I think, exaggerated to a degree. I don't think a room addition is going to cost somebody $400,000. And if it does, you should fire your contractor. I mean, because, my husband's in the construction business. My whole family's in the construction business. So it's not like I don't understand this stuff. I understand it pretty good. So I think we've tried to do it in as everybody has said, in a fair and balanced way. And we'll review it, just like we'll review the things we've done with code enforcement. By the way, that review should be coming pretty soon.
Oh, the amnesty program's coming up, yeah.
Now that and all the other things. I think we wanted a full review, didn't we?
Yes, for that and for the, we'll bring we were also supposed to bring the options regarding Chapter 26 at the same time, which I'll work with Jennifer's office on.
And so the zip, does the zip just expire? Is that how it goes away, or what?
30th?
It automatically expires.
On April 30th?
No, tonight, if you enact the regulations tonight, it automatically expires upon expiration of the regulations being adopted.
Okay, and
Not a moratorium.
then what, for those who are affected, how many permits are sitting around waiting?
We would know if none are submitted. We have about 4 or 5 of them in the office right now waiting to go.
And I presume you're going to contact those people
Of course, yes.
quickly?
Yep.
But you're going to have to review it now against all of this new stuff. So that'll take a little bit of a minute, okay? And you're going to bring back the binding resolution or enabling resolution for architectural review.
Yes.
One quick question, because the south side isn't going to be the only place we deal with the ugly townhomes. You know, they're on the north side too, multifamily, that under 6-unit thing. I don't want those to come to us. I'm just saying, what would be the process to put them under architectural review as well, wherever they are? You know what I'm saying? I mean, just multifamily in general.
I mean, that would be a code change, so, and
Because
probably an enabling resolution change.
Right.
We get equally ugly townhomes up here under 5 units as we do down there. That's a citywide thing.
We'd have to really look at that and come back and let you know what we.
Yeah,
what we
I think we should.
Yeah.
Because isn't it going to be weird that they're looking at half the cities and not looking at the other half? The multifamily? I understand the home thing because of the historic nature of everything, but the multifamily, that's happening in other places, is what I'm
think,
saying.
Mayor, there's a lot to consider there as far as.
I'm sure there is. I'm sure I'm simplifying it, but I do
One day
think.
at a time, sweet Jesus.
Yeah, well, I don't want to lose the train of thought, though. I do think we have to kind of look at that a little bit. I think anything that's larger like that should get some kind of architectural review.
Okay.
I'm not saying that it has to meet any particular standard. I'm just saying it should get looked at.
Well, what I'd like to do then is have a look at what we need to do to adjust the enabling resolution in the code as well, and then bring that back to you for consensus direction as far as that
we can talk
goes.
about it a
Right.
little bit then.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, you going to drink now, George? Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, thank you and your team.
Nikki, Kimberly Horn, city manager, you all.
You've been working on this since you started, so it's been a year and a half, right?
Not quite.
Almost.
And as we've all, I'm sure you experienced the same thing. We all, like, during these last 2 weeks, had a lot of other due diligence to do and drove George crazy on his cell phone, and he was absolutely available, which was great, and just responded to the questions. It helps a lot because it's a big decision.
Well, I too did talk to architects.
Thank you.
And what I found from that really was, look, every architect, you know, they go look at the codes. And then they design to the code. I mean, it's not that difficult. There really isn't. It's not the homeowner that's going to have to sit down and figure it out. It's going to be your architect, so. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Gao.
Aye.
Commissioner Torga.
Aye.
Commissioner Franny.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kynes.
Aye.
Mayor Bajowski.
Aye, and that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Okay, we have the May 5th agenda. Any changes to that?
Nope.
Everybody good? Are we gonna, do we want to put that
Mayor.
architectural committee thing on here?
Oh, well, I'm not sure about that. I mean, we could send that to a work session as well, but I was actually going to ask, since we had a couple.
No, I meant they're binding, we got to get them added.
I knew what you meant.
Oh, okay.
But I also think that you have some language in your resolution that also allows you to assign tasks to them, which you've de facto done by doing this. So we can clean that up and we can look at whether or not that should go to a work session. I was going to ask, just in hearing that we have maybe a lighter schedule on the 5th, if there's 4 ORC ordinances that we were bringing forward to, so we could put one of those on, since it's an ordinance, you know, it's an ordinance, and the ARC one is a resolution, so we can bring that to the Tuesday morning meeting if you'd like.
And now I'm getting it. The ARC resolution is,
We're going to look and review their enabling resolution to be sure none of the language needs to be tweaked to account for the additional roles that the ARC may play in executive recommendations regarding the overlay. Correct.
got it.
Yeah, so, and we'll look at that, Mayor. I just, I don't have it up right now, so I want to take a look at it. But we do know that we could put one of the ORC ones on there, so I'll get with Rebecca with which one it is. But if you all are okay with that addition,
Yeah.
I think we could accomplish
Yeah,
that
these are
that
two
night.
pretty easy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. I need a motion to approve with the things that Nikki and Rebecca add.
So what did you add?
The ORC, that's.
Oh, okay, the ORC.
Okay, so Vice Mayor, who's my second?
Second.
Second is Commissioner Gao. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimously. Okay, thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you for watching this City of Dunedin government meeting. If you'd like to review any part of this meeting or watch any previous government meeting coverage, you can watch these meetings online anytime through the city's website, dunedingov.com. Stay connected with everything Dunedin. Follow the city on this channel and on the city's Facebook page, through Twitter, and on the city's YouTube channel. Thanks again for watching this Dunedin television production.